In a dungeon filled with monsters of all kinds, some powerful humans fight against them, and even with many enemies, their powers are enough to annihilate them. That is, until another beast, incomparable to the ones defeated so far, appears. It's nearly 10 times the size of the small ones and wields a massive weapon in its hand. Faced with that, a veteran warrior yells for Yudo to get out of there as fast as possible. And so the boy, who is the group's squire, obeys the order, clearly trembling with fear. But before he can escape, the monster's first attack is aimed directly at the squire. And unfortunately, he takes the hit head-on, flying back until he crashes into a wall, badly injured. Because of this, the veteran criticizes his lack of strength, but quickly moves in and neutralizes the threat with a strike strong enough to pierce through the monster, and defeats it, leaving it lying on the ground until a magic stone materializes from inside it. Everyone is impressed by it and ends up cheering for the victory. With the battle over, the veteran thanks the baggage carrier for his work. The squire is Yudo Kirishima, a Class F adventurer. This time, he truly thought he was going to die, but his vitality is like that of a cockroach. So the adventurer gives the protagonist a bonus, a single small coin. And although it might seem like something good, it's not even enough to pay for a day's worth of food. Because of that, Yudo thinks that one day these people mocking him will regret it. Because in the future, he will become strong and reach the level of a Class S adventurer. One day, dungeons like the one the protagonist was just in began appearing all over the world. But around that time, humanity also awakened to magic. And from that, the profession of adventurer emerged, those responsible for defeating monsters in exchange for money. However, even after these powers appeared, Yudo remained the weakest of all. Back in the dungeon, the group stands before a massive gate that looks like the boss room. It's said that if they conquer this level, they'll meet the financial goal for the month. For some of them, this will be the first time they'll earn that much money after 10 years in the Black Guild. But the veteran tells his comrade not to complain about the guild in front of the rookies. After all, it's such a good place that even a loser like the squire can work there. And remembering that several of them start laughing because his failure is so great it can't even be helped, until one of them, still laughing, asks them to stop. The protagonist, for his part, has the job of a sage. It was supposed to be a melee class with high magic and multi-element control. But the truth is, our protagonist has low health and only a single point of mana. Because of that, with no magic, it's impossible to use any of the attacks of this rare class, which is ridiculous. Yudo has to endure this kind of humiliation daily, and since he stays idle, he's also constantly intimidated. The veteran comments that after the boy's parents died, he had to take care of his younger sister all by himself, which the protagonist confirms, explaining that she's still in high school, so he needs money for her tuition. In that case, the adventurer says that for someone as kind as the squire, he'll get a special mission. And finally, revealing the rod of this group, the stronger adventurers open the gate and push the weakest one inside, who falls completely stunned and in disbelief. To explain, the veteran comments that the conditions to clear this dungeon were recently deciphered. So Yudo looks around until he spots ancient text carved into a rock nearby. It says that the belly of the hungry monster of these lands needs an offering, and that offering is simply a human body sacrifice. Yudo panics the moment he understands what that means, but it's already too late because he's already inside as the sacrifice. And even though he screams for them to wait, nothing is done to help him except for a cruel mockery until the door finally closes. In the end, this had been their intention from the very beginning, and within seconds, the torches in the room light up. Then the hero notices something. The one responsible for the sacrifice is a monster of the scythe, who doesn't look friendly at all. Yudo senses the danger approaching, and the moment the scythe comes for him, he dodges quickly. Over and over again, he keeps dodging, without understanding how he ended up in this situation. However, the monster doesn't care about any of that. All it wants is to capture its prey using whatever force is necessary. After being struck by a powerful blow, the protagonist crashes into a pile of bones, badly injured. Little by little, the monster approaches to finish what it started, and if things continue this way, the boy will die, so he needs to think quickly. As it walks, the monster reveals a container filled with many souls, which appears to hold the soul meant for the sacrifice. At that moment, the hero realizes he's likely going to meet his end in this place. But that only lasts until his phone rings, and when he checks what it is, he sees a photo of his sister. Right then, he remembers how much she sees him as a true hero, and having someone that important believe in him is enough to make him start believing it too. With all this strength, the protagonist blocks an attack with his shield, because with so much to lose, giving up here is not an option. The monster's attack clashes against the protagonist's defense until suddenly a golden light appears, surprising both of them. With the light, a system message appears stating that the preparations for awakening are complete. It then asks if the boy wants to activate the unique sage ability known as Successor. It was the first time the protagonist had ever seen anything like this, but even without knowing exactly what it was, his instincts screamed not to let this opportunity slip away, and with the selection confirmed, the awakening began. Upon accepting the conditions, a golden light bursts forth, causing destruction throughout the area and scaring the monster. From there, the protagonist begins to levitate as some kind of power seems to enter his body. 2 years ago, when he first awakened his unique abilities through research, the boy was thrilled at the thought of becoming an adventurer. He believed he could escape a life of poverty and sees a bright future. However, due to his extremely low mana level, he couldn't use any of the sage's abilities. And before he realized it, Yudo had become a permanently low-level adventurer. Even when he finally found a guild to work with, it turned out to be corrupt, treating him like a mere tool. But still, Yudo never forgot about a certain person he needed to protect. So now, with this new power, the protagonist declares that he will not die in a place like this. The legendary ability called Successor is awakened, releasing the martial arts Sage's magic. In addition, the Shield Tree is unlocked, a power belonging to a sage who mastered the path of the sword through magic. Now the protagonist has the abilities of a sage specialized in close-quarters combat flowing through his veins. The monster quickly charges in to put an end to the boy's sudden resurgence. But this time, our protagonist dodges and counters with a precise kick. This time, he feels as if his body is as light as a feather. The memories of the martial arts sage flow through his body, and somehow Yudo instinctively knows exactly what to do. With this, everything changes for the boy because now he can finally pursue what he truly wants. Back in the battle, things appear evenly matched until the monster smirks wickedly and opens its mouth to swallow the soul-filled container whole. Upon consuming it, the beast's strength multiplies many times over, which means it has been consuming the souls of adventurers this whole time. However, this time, the boy warns that it won't get a taste of his soul. The monster doesn't seem to care and begins launching powerful attacks. In the boy's mind, all he needs now is speed and power, so he channels all of his magic into his legs. Like a lightning bolt, he dashes across the battlefield, dodging everything coming his way. In response, the monster prepares a fire spell to strike him in the air. But the boy thinks fast and suddenly counters with a kick to the spell, somehow sending it flying back where it came from. That's when the boy realizes he can reflect long-range attacks, and the monster takes his own blow head-on. The hero mocks the situation, asking if all that beast's confidence earlier was just hot air. Furious, the monster roars and creates a dark magical circle, which the protagonist recognizes as enchantment magic. This means the monster is preparing to attack with its full power. But it also means the monster will be defenseless for a moment. Gathering all the magic in his hands, the protagonist manages to form a sword of energy. And at the moment, the monster fires a massive magic beam. Feeling proud of the power's sheer magnitude, its expression quickly changes to one of fear because the protagonist vanishes and reappears behind it, piercing the beast's chest with a single aura-infused sword strike. With the monster's destruction, our hero receives the achievement for defeating the D-rank boss known as the Demon of the Undead. On top of that, he's granted a solo clear bonus, a magic stone the size of the boy's hand. Because of that, he celebrates with all his might, marking the first of many victories. Later, the protagonist sits on a park bench reflecting, because the guild simply confiscated all the magic stones and items, which makes Yudo decide to leave it. At least he managed to keep that bonus orb, which is probably a rare item. Suddenly, the protagonist's watch beeps, signaling a large-scale mission to defeat a necromancer, something that naturally makes the boy curious. At the location, about 100 participants are gathered. This is a C-class dungeon, and it's definitely different from the D-rank ones the boy had faced so far. Suddenly, a bully remarks how surprised he is to see the hero there, and mocks him by asking what the weakest guy in the guild is trying to prove. On top of that, he makes sure to say the boy will crawl in misery forever, which Yudo agrees with. But he agrees only when it comes to the Yuto that the bully used to know, because now he's a different person. As his first move, the hero faces the intimidation head-on and tells the bully not to be arrogant, which seriously irritates him. However, before a fight breaks out, a shout grabs everyone's attention and one of the adventurers points in the direction it's coming from. The one approaching is Serena Hattori, a Class A adventurer and vice leader of the Silver Wings Guild. She's one of the leaders of the raid, and since it's an open event for all, she scolds the bully for the intimidation. Then she advises the protagonist not to let himself be provoked so easily. But changing the subject, she compliments his courage in standing up for himself, saying not many people are like that. Right after that, all the adventurers gather to listen to the instructions. Serena asks for everyone's attention to announce that today's boss is a necromancer. She states that he has many minions, and that's why they need so much manpower. It's also explained that the Silver Wings will handle the boss while the others focus on the subordinates. However, suddenly a light appears behind the girl, leaving everyone alarmed, especially because even before they enter the portal, the monsters from inside began pouring out. This is clearly something completely different from what they had expected. Serena, in turn, yells for everyone to stick to the plan and defend their assigned positions. But out of nowhere, an old man appears in front of her, making her lose balance and stumble down the stairs. Because of that, Yudo runs at full speed and reaches her in an instant to save the damsel in distress. With Serena in his arms, he asks if she's okay, and now it's the girl who feels embarrassed. Naturally, the vice leader notices that his magical power is immense, and since the boy was said to be weak, everything becomes very confusing. Getting straight to the point, Yudo asks if he should deal with it, but suddenly his pocket starts to glow. The undead orb begins reacting for some reason, and when the hero pays attention to it, he realizes something that makes him very happy. Without wasting time, the old man rushes at the boy to slice him in half with his sword. But not only does the protagonist dodge, he responds with a powerful kick to the monster's armor, creating a hole in the chest plate and revealing the monster's core. Even so, it wouldn't be so easy to finish off the boss, so the old man grabs Yudo's leg and throws him far away, and sends him crashing hard into a wall, causing serious injuries. Something like that dealt major damage to Yudo, but he could still fight thanks to the resilience of the martial arts sage. And now, even after getting beaten up, he's smiling because he finally fulfilled all the conditions. To unlock a new ability, the conditions were to have an encounter with an ancient hero and resonate with the soul of an adventurer. That's why the successor skill was activated, and the system asked if the boy wanted to continue, making that moment the most perfect one for a Yudo showtime. While the main battle unfolds, the adventurers deal with the necromancer's minions. Among them, that same bully from earlier easily defeats one with a single strike of his spear, making the skeleton monster lose its head. But they were undead, and something like that wouldn't be enough to keep them dead. So the skeleton simply picks its skull off the ground and places it back onto its cervical vertebra, showing the brute that it won't be that easy. After all, at that moment, it didn't matter how many were defeated, because their numbers never seemed to decrease. Yudo holds his ground, restraining the boss while the other adventurers attack the skeletons. Amid the attacks, the protagonist blocks a strike, but the wind alone sends him flying, causing him some pain. It seems the boy won't be able to win using sword techniques alone. To fix this, Yudo summons several magic circles beneath his feet. This unlocks the passive ability of the Sage of Knowledge known as Instant Foresight. Almost instinctively, the necromancer charges in to attack, but this time the protagonist's eyes can easily see through his movements. Instant Foresight is an ability that allows the user to read the opponent's next move. The hero might not have been able to win with just the martial arts sage, and even the Sage of Knowledge alone wouldn't have been enough. But the fusion of strength and knowledge brings about a powerful result. And that result is the consequence of the protagonist's original power, which in an instant shatters the necromancer's core with ease. In Japan, only 3 others besides him have reached the classification of Sage. All 3 are long-range specialists and consequently mage-type adventurers. In this case, Serena wonders if the hero is really just a normal sage. Now that their boss is defeated, all that remains are the undead soldiers. But within seconds, they begin to collapse and all the energy is transferred until the necromancer is killed through his core. Then the old man rises and, despite praising the adventurer, declares that he won't be able to defeat him. Immediately, the brute panics upon realizing that the necromancer absorbed the skeleton's soldiers to revive himself. And worse than that is the condition of the other adventurers who are already starting to lose to the skeletons with infinite vitality. Faced with this, one of the Silver Wings members calls Serena to retreat for now, and unfortunately, that seems like the only option. However, to keep her from feeling down, the protagonist comforts her by saying he'll take care of it, standing once again in front of the monster. Back then, it was said that the undead orb had the ability to reveal the enemy's weakness based on the magical power of its wielder. So now Yudo raises that orb, asking everyone to lend him their strength. With that, the remaining skeletons are surrounded by the souls of fallen adventurers, piquing the necromancer's curiosity. This was a strategy meant to prevent the sorcerer from reviving his subordinates. With a different ability, the protagonist creates several energy swords in the air and declares that the monster underestimated humans. While all the skeletons are enveloped by the souls of the fallen adventurers, the S-rank ability known as Coordinated Designation allows each of those energy swords to strike their target like guided missiles. And so, while all the monsters are destroyed, the brute from earlier is left unable to understand what just happened, because it seems the person he once considered a loser had awakened, and now, with ease, defeated the necromancer boss of a C-class dungeon. Now the protagonist's life level is equivalent to rank B, and his magic level equivalent to rank S. With the success message displayed in front of everyone, the adventurers cheer in celebration. They rush to hug him and invite the hero to join their own parties next time. Naturally, with all this attention, the protagonist remembers his former fake companions. But as he turns around, everyone's expressions while talking to him are completely different. And this makes Yudo truly happy, to the brute's dismay. Suddenly, something catches the boy's attention. As he looks at the necromancer, it seems like the creature is calling him. And after discovering something, the brute shouts out Kirishima's name, but the necromancer vanishes. Not just him, the protagonist also disappears, teleported to a different location. Still unaware of where he is in a grassy plain, a strange being begins to approach him. And out of the darkness, it reveals itself as a terrifying type of monster to the boy. And even to the system, which issues a danger alert warning the hero not to approach the creature. The moment that monster appears before the hero, the danger warning immediately puts him on alert. But that wasn't enough, because the monster closes the distance in an instant, creating a sensation in the hero that makes it feel like he had just died. But that only happened thanks to the Sage of Knowledge's prediction, which had been activated. So the hero dodged, and right beside him, everything nearby was destroyed. If it hadn't been for the instant recognition, he definitely wouldn't be alive anymore. Faced with that overwhelming presence, Yudo becomes frightened because he had never even heard rumors of something like it. However, even though he's trembling with fear, the protagonist still finds it interesting. Therefore, the system notifies that the martial arts sage is impressed by the successor's courage. Back in the confrontation, the two are facing each other, and it looks like the monster is about to attack. But before it can, another one, even bigger, appears from behind and swallows it right in front of the protagonist. Still, the situation doesn't end there because high up in the sky, the silhouette of an even larger monster can be seen. And right after, an explosion erupts across the grassy field, making the hero wonder what's going on. Then, as the dust settles, that monster is defeated by a giant dragon, displaying the force of the law of the jungle. Instead of being afraid, the hero finds it amusing to realize he's just an ant among so many predators. But suddenly, a splitting headache hits, and a message appears in his mind saying it's still too early. A few seconds later, the protagonist opens his eyes again, but this time, in his bed at home. Naturally, Yuta finds it strange that it was all just a dream, but the truth is that his memory is fuzzy after defeating the necromancer. And besides not knowing how he got back home, his hands are trembling and his face is bleeding, proving it was all real. Yet once again, a smile appears on our hero's face just from thinking that one day, he'll be able to achieve that power. Suddenly, the protagonist's younger sister knocks on his door, asking if her big brother is awake. Yudo immediately becomes curious to know if something happened with Ariza, but she only seems a little annoying that he's still asleep since it's already time for breakfast. Heading to the kitchen, our hero is surprised because his sister prepares a surprise with tons of delicious food. Faced with that, Yudo asks what's going on for them to have such an extravagant breakfast, and his sister replies that since her brother brought back a lot of money this time, she gave it her all to cook. Besides, Arisa just wants him to eat, and the hero begins to recall all the hardships he went through. If he had given up back then, he would have made his sister cry all over again. But now he eats this delicious meal she prepared, and naturally, he begins to cry. Arisa panics, trying to figure out why her big brother is crying. Then the hero just replies that it must be the onion in the hamburger, though of course she doesn't believe that. Because of that, the girl asks if it tastes bad, which makes Yudo get up to say how good it is. So the two sit and eat peacefully in a warm moment, until shortly after the meal, the girl says she has something to tell the protagonist. She picks up a piece of paper from the top of the microwave and shows it to the hero, saying it's something for his new beginning. In a massive tower surrounded by forests in the city, the hero can barely believe he's back there again. Because this is the Adventurer Aptitude Test, also commonly known as the Experiment. The Experiment is a test that measures an adventurer's strength, and the results can be used to get a job at a guild. For guilds, it's also a chance to recruit promising rookies who can contribute right away. That's why, as always, the place is crowded, and a certain elderly man observes the adventurers. An executive asks how this year's candidates are looking, but the old man doesn't think there's anything too impressive. Still, among them, there's a blonde boy who is the reason they're all there. He possesses the class of Holy Knight, which is quite rare. Only 10 people in Japan have it. Additionally, Canada Kamishao is at the top of rank A and also serves as a promotional face for the guild. Canada is without a doubt the one being pursued by everyone. However, something else catches the old man's attention. A certain person is also there. That person is Koji Tsukishiro from the Abyss Guild, ranked among the top 100 Ranka adventurers in Japan. Naturally, the old man finds it strange that he's there and worries that he's also after the blonde. But the person standing in the same place as Canada is also the one Kauji is watching. While stretching, two people approach our hero and one of them seems to recognize him. To explain to his companion, he reminds him that Yudo is the famous veteran known as the weakest sage. But not wanting to be looked down on, the hero says he came to take the test again, which at first surprises the two. Then it makes them laugh until they cry, since to them retaking the test won't make any difference. Unbothered, the protagonist tells them they should worry more about themselves than about him. However, instead of listening to the advice, the two charge at him, interpreting his words as disrespect. First, the guy in the green shirt attacks, but the hero dodges. Then the one in the red shirt lands a powerful kick on the protagonist's guard, making him proud of the hit. But his expression quickly shifts to worry, because Yuto not only manages to catch his foot, but also spins him around in an instant, slamming him to the ground defeated. Finally, the guy in the green shirt realizes the trouble he's gotten into. The pressure in front of him feels like he's facing a monster. Even so, the hero is kind enough to ask if he still wants to continue. Then the brute runs off with his tail between his legs, prompting Koji to confirm the rumors about the necromancer raid. Now the leader of the Abyss Guild declares that he wants to recruit Yuto. Without further delay, someone starts clapping to get everyone's attention, announcing that time is up. That same person warns everyone that even though it's a test, there's no guarantee of safety. Therefore, if adventurers want to prove they're useful, they must climb as if their lives depended on it. And so the trial begins. From now on, Koji will be watching closely to see what Yuto can do with his powers. Suddenly, several monsters appear and each one begins to fight one of the adventurer candidates. Among the newbies, one guy launches a fireball with great difficulty at an enemy's face. Even though it deals a little damage, it's not enough. As the guy runs from the monster he couldn't defeat, the previous brute prepares a strike, but is slashed by the creature's claws, sending him crashing to the ground, practically defeated. The evaluation is based on points, and to earn points, candidates need to defeat monsters or complete objectives inside the dungeon. But at this rate, the guy in the green shirt won't be able to score enough points. Meanwhile, the Holy Knight and the protagonist are gaining the upper hand. Because of that, the blonde realizes that the one competing beside him is the one known as the Sage without magic power. But based on the hero's performance already reaching 1,000 points, Canada knows he'll have to give it his all to keep up. Like true rivals, the two begin to compete, and for a moment the blonde pulls ahead. With so many points, the brute from earlier can't believe what he's seeing. A bit deeper into the dungeon, the two arrive at a trap room. With his high agility stat, the blonde believes he can avoid them and move on. Even if he gets hit, he's convinced it'll just be a scratch. So Canada tells the hero he'll show him how fast he is. But unexpectedly, the protagonist says that doing that is impossible. The blonde gets very irritated, thinking the boy is suggesting they run away, and instead of denying it, Yudo sticks to what he said. In response, Canada says he's disappointed in the hero because he had already started seeing him as a rival. So calling him a coward, the blonde tells him to just stand back and watch. But even while being humiliated, the protagonist grabs him and tells him to look carefully, because those arrows on the wall are poisonous, meaning even the slightest touch is fatal. Yudo says that sometimes running away is also a valid option, and if they take another path, they'll find a route ahead. To demonstrate, the hero creates a small energy sword and throws it at a button on top of the wall, opening a secret gate. Even though he's surprised by the solution, the blonde also feels frustrated, believing that avoiding such a simple trap is meaningless. Even the cameras focus on his frustrated expression, and Kaoji's allies notice that they're already almost on the 6th floor. From what they observe, it makes sense for Canada to be on the upper floors, but not Yuto. So the officers try to figure out how he got there, while Kui smiles. Back in the dungeon at this point, only the two of them have made it this far, and seeing the blonde looking tired, the hero asks if he's okay. So Canada admits that he isn't, because unlike him, he trained in a different way. And Yudo brags that he became quite resilient during his time in the Black Guild. That is, until a sudden noise startles them both and makes them run as fast as they can. Just ahead, they see a little girl running from a giant bear, to their great surprise. Canada, however, realizes he won't make it in time, so he has no choice but to use his sword. And upon doing so, the skill Holy Knight's Death is activated, temporarily boosting all of his stats. Yudo yells for his teammate to wait, because something feels off. But the blonde defeats the monster with a single strike and hugs the girl, telling her everything's okay now. What he didn't expect was that the girl was also a monster. Seeing this from afar, the protagonist quickly activates his power and launches an energy sword at the treacherous beast. Fortunately, he manages to hit the target, finishing it off with just that one attack. Thus, the little girl who had been saved by Canada is annihilated right in front of him. In that moment, the blonde panics like never before and rushes to try to save the child. But upon realizing there's nothing he can do, Canada grabs the protagonist by the neck, demanding an explanation. Like anyone who doesn't understand what just happened, he's completely devastated. However, before the protagonist even needs to explain, the monster rises again, now in its true form. And the blonde has to be saved by Yudo, who is sent flying backward by a blow. Finally, Canada realizes the size of the mistake he made, and the hero tells him it's a mimic-type monster. The monstrous little girl quickly charges at the blonde again, but unfortunately, he's immobilized due to the recoil of his skill. To fix that, the protagonist rushes in and lands a powerful kick on the monster, finally eliminating it once and for all. In the end, Canada wants to know why, so Yudo tells him he became unable to fight because he was reckless in using his final skill. But what the blonde really wanted to know was why the hero didn't hesitate even for a second. To that, Yudo rephrases his answer, saying it was obvious, it was a monster. Still, that's not what he meant. Canada wanted to know why the hero was so irresponsible, and more than that, he desperately wanted to grow stronger. Extending his hand to the blonde, Yudo says it's important to stay calm to assess the situation. But Canada reacts childishly and slaps the hand away. He asks if the hero thinks he's superior and acting like some sort of expert, and he says Yudo can't understand how he feels. That's why from now on, Canada says they'll go their separate ways and that he'll move forward on his own, which just makes the hero think it's weird, because in the end, they're heading to the same place anyway. At the top of the 10th floor, Canada is proud to have finally reached it, because if he passes this point, he'll be chosen among the best. Suddenly, something catches his attention, and on instinct, he dodges a fatal attack and manages to reposition himself. A skeletal knight then appears, mocking him by saying a rat really is good at running. Being the proud knight he is, the blonde draws his sword and activates his secret skill to make the monster regret those words. Canada needs to finish this before the skill's effect runs out. While defending, the monster is slightly impressed, but every strike that follows is blocked one by one. And even with the advantage, not even his strongest attack can break through the skeletal knight's defense. The knight finds the brightness of the sword quite annoying. Unfortunately, that's when the 5-second immobilization penalty kicks in. The monster easily breaks through the blonde's defenses, landing a hit that sends him rolling across the floor. And as soon as he stops, the system announces that due to recoil, all of his skills will be weakened. To minimize the damage from a dungeon collapse, adventurers usually fight with everything that got to the very end. That's exactly what Canada's parents did, making the day he received the news the day he decided to become an S-rank adventurer. Back in the battle, the skeletal knight shows a bit of mercy, telling the boy to just leave. But at that moment, the blonde's eyes light up with intense fury, and a red aura spreads across his body because the Kamasho family are warriors who never run away. After shouting that at the monster, the blonde charges forward at high speed, but the knight easily defends himself, commenting that such effort is in vain. Then a strong white light appears, and along with it, a voice congratulates the boy for holding on this long as well. The one who appears is the protagonist, who once again saves the blonde's life. And even though his energy sword breaks from the monster's attack, the hero doesn't give up his position on the front line. Because standing before them, the protagonist is determined to show what it means for a veteran to guide his junior. At the moment the hero appears, Canada doesn't feel relieved, he feels disrespected. So he tells Yudo to mind his own business, but now is definitely not the time to be stubborn. Canada, for his part, says this is the fight he chose, but the hero asks if he's happy to die here. Yudo truly doesn't know what ideals the blonde has, but he believes he must be aiming for something. So the question is, was all this effort just for that? And since he can't answer, Canada lets Yudo fight, but still thinks it's impossible for someone who ran from a trap to win. Back in the battle, a monster charges forward, questioning what the boy plans to do with such a toy. With a strike, he destroys the hero's sword once more and sends him flying. Enraged, the monster tells the hero to pick up a real sword, because this is a duel between knights, but Yudo replies that the sword isn't his. Still, the skeletal knight comments that if he doesn't use one, he won't be able to pierce his armor. To that, the hero says he can still run, surprising everyone, although that's exactly what Canada expected. First, Yudo interrupted a knight's duel, then showed up with a flimsy sword. But worst of all, now he wants to abandon the fight. Since they heard of the knight's code of honor, the monster becomes extremely furious and charges in for a final attack. However, the hero manages to dodge with a high jump that confuses the horse, causing the skeletal knight to fall from his mount. Yudo already knew what the monster was going to do because a lancer's attack always comes from a direct charge. That's why the blonde realizes the hero used the enemy's own nature against him. While forming a massive energy arrow in the sky, Yudo tells Canada to remember what he's about to say. He says that retreating doesn't mean giving up and finally launches that spell toward the skeletal knight. It hits directly, passing over the blonde and wiping out everything in its path. Yudo knew that this type of monster had boosted stats thanks to its mount, and once it falls, it becomes just a regular soldier. That's why, even in a historic ranking, the protagonist led with double the points of the second-place contender. Yudo can hardly believe he won with a ranking above the best in the country. But now Canada looks at the hero differently, trying to understand what he does differently to achieve the same results. With nothing else left to conquer in that tower, the two return to the test hall. Then officers from various guilds rush in to recruit them. Naturally, the protagonist receives more offers, having been the one to defeat the final boss. But even as he's ignored by the crowd, Canada receives an unexpected visitor. The blonde immediately recognizes Kauji, who feels honored to be remembered by someone so talented. For Canada, though, it's only natural to remember someone with S-rank skills. Either way, the blonde says the protagonist is on the other side. But Koji didn't come to the wrong person. The one he's looking for is Canada. Naturally, the blonde questions whether he's really being invited to the Abyss Guild after behaving so dishonorably. But about that, the guild leader says they'll talk more in the car. And as for Yudo, since he proved to be even more impressive than expected, Kauji thought of something better than just an invitation. In the end, this is the first time the protagonist has been so sought after. But the joy is short-lived because suddenly everyone's phones begin to ring. On a panel in the test room, it's shown that a dungeon break has been detected at Minen High School. So far, 2 A-class adventurers have lost their lives, and the estimated threat level is A disaster on the scale of 100,000 people. But worst of all is the location where it's happening. Looking at his phone, Yudo sees messages from Arisa saying something is going on at her school. In any case, the guild officers call the hero to evacuate with them immediately. But by the time they realized it, he was no longer there. Now all that matters to the protagonist is running as fast as possible to save Arisa. At the site of the tragedy, several people are being pushed back by the police while a reporter records the scene. Citizens shout to be let through because their family members are inside the school, but the officers can't allow them through, even though they don't want to be there either. However, one particular person doesn't hesitate to leap over the barricade. That's our protagonist, who for the first time witnesses a dungeon break up close. He quickly pulls out his phone, but there's no reply from his sister, which might mean the signal is being blocked by the magic density. Either way, a monster appears to confront the protagonist, proving there are other priorities now. The hero quickly summons his sword and charges in, delivering a diagonal slash across the beast. But the damage is so small, the monster practically mocks him. Even the weakest monsters here are as powerful as the strongest ones from the experiment. But in this case, the protagonist wraps his hand in energy to change strategies, and attacks the monster in close combat with a punch strong enough to finally defeat it for good. With one of the enemies defeated, he still needs to hurry, but as he walks through the wreckage, the protagonist notices someone wounded, someone important. Inside the Abyss Guild leader's car, Canada watches the news about the number of casualties in this A-rank dungeon break, and he's worried because it's exactly like what happened when his parents died. Kaoji, on the other hand, consoles the boy, saying they were very brave 3 years ago in Shibuya. Unexpectedly, the guild master knew about it because Icarus was a noble guild with a sense of justice. But the blonde knew that if the S-class adventurers had arrived earlier, his parents would still be alive. Even now, there's no sign of the S-rankers, so Canada asks what they're doing. And Kaoji has to inform him that unfortunately, they're not coming, delivering a harsh dose of reality to the boy. It's said that even if they do come, they'll only arrive after the situation is already over. So of course, the boy asks what exactly the guild leader is trying to say. To explain, there's only one way to stop a dungeon break, destroying the gate's core. It's explained that the core is the singularity that links Earth to another world, so it takes a very powerful strike to sever it. Canada becomes curious and asks if the break will end if they manage to destroy it. Then Kuji reveals that yes, it will, but there are two problems. The first is the massive number of monsters, which makes it impossible to inspect the area. And the second is the number of guardians protecting the core, because ever since the first break decades ago, every guardian has been at least S-rank. Canada, in turn, is stunned because he's never even heard of a monster that strong before. It's said that even if someone manages to find the core, an S-rank monster is the end of the line for A-rank adventurers. So unfortunately, it becomes clear that those going into fight now are merely sacrifices. As for the break, the Silver Wings Guild is in charge, led by Shingo Azura and vice leader Serena Hattori. Then Kuji looks at his phone, thinking that fate is a little ironic. Back at the dungeon break, the protagonist realizes that the injured person is wearing the Silver Wings uniform. But the guy seems more concerned about why the hero is there. Holding him in his arms, Yudo says that his sister studies there. But suddenly, the guy suffers a worsening episode of his condition. Still, before losing his life, the name Serena is shouted loud and clear, something our hero manages to hear. Deeper inside the dungeon break, one of the girl's companions is lifted by the legs and finished off right in front of her, so brutally that Serena falls to her knees in shock and screams as loud as she can, unable to save him. As he ventures deeper into the school, the protagonist shows great concern for Serena. But first, he needs to find Arisa, and when he opens the first door, Yudo is shocked to nearly fall into a pit of lava. Practically fighting for his life, he has to leap with all his strength to grab hold of the other side, a terrifying moment. Apparently, the real world is beginning to be consumed by the dungeon's erosion. Since Arisa is a second-year student, Yudo wonders if he should head to the upper-grade classrooms. But instability is forming in the area, and the protagonist hasn't established a route, which means the next area might be random. He had been using his magic non-stop since the experiment, which was starting to make him feel weak. However, at that moment, the protagonist realizes he has something with him that might help with his magic. Suddenly, a group of monsters appears, putting an end to the brief calm. But even while feeling weak, our hero reacts, shouting for everyone to get out of his way as he uses his powers. In a more isolated spot in the library, Arisa, who is hiding along with her senior Ryoka, apologizes for asking to stay. But in response, she gets a flick on the forehead, because the girl doesn't want her friend to blame herself, especially since she was the one who suggested coming to the library. Even now, Arisa tries to contact her brother, so Ryoka asks if it's Yudo, to which the sister replies yes, with a lot of excitement. Quite the opposite for her friend, since a sage with zero magic power isn't going to be much help. Being totally honest, Ryoka says it doesn't matter how strong the boy is now, they'll have to survive on their own. But despite understanding her friend's point, Arisa is confident the hero will save them, since he's ranked A in knowledge. Even though she's so optimistic, her friend truly doesn't know if they'll be able to make it out with their current abilities. Then at a certain moment, an explosion occurs, putting Ryoka on high alert and terrifying the younger girl. Suddenly, thick saliva starts to drip behind the two. That's because a huge monster had found them from atop one of the shelves, leaving them both in despair. Wasting no time, the monster slices the bookshelf in half. Luckily, they manage to dodge. But Ryoka steps in front to defend the younger girl, telling her to run while she handles the creature. Now it's a do-or-die situation with only one chance to make a summoning. When the command is triggered, wings like those of an angel appear. But the summoning turns out to be just a plain white dove. With that, the monster raises its weapon again to attack, and just as expected, Ryoka had no luck with the summon. However, the two happen to be there at just the right time because suddenly a fist hits the monster's jaw, sending it flying. As the dust settles, Arisa's eyes shine with hope. Gratefully, the protagonist thanks the older girl for protecting his sister, and now extends his hand, saying it's his turn to protect her. Even though it's just a polite gesture, Hyuka interprets it as the charm of a prince. Regardless, while the two have this brief exchange, the monster recovers from the blow. which gets the protagonist quite excited, since every monster here is as strong as a boss. With the two facing each other, Ryoko takes a moment to observe the battle. The last time she saw the hero, he seemed uncertain and scared. That's why she wishes she could have seen this smile before graduation. First, the protagonist grabs a table and sets it up as a barricade for the girls. Then, unexpectedly, he starts pushing the object forward with force, running straight at the monster. In response, the Minotaur strikes the wooden table, slicing it in half, but once it finishes, it realizes no one was behind it. Using that opportunity, the protagonist jumps over to launch an aerial attack. However, the monster defends and throws the hero away, making him crash into several bookshelves, leaving the younger sister extremely worried. It seems this monster has muscles even tougher than ogres, and its strength is definitely greater than that of the skeletal knight. So the hero wonders if he can actually defeat it, and to help, Kirpa shouts that monsters like this usually have weak lower limbs. The system confirms she's right, so the protagonist thanks her for the tip. Now with a new strategy in mind, our hero charges in, confident that he can beat this giant. He quickly lands a kick to the Minotaur's calf, and as expected, it causes a lot of damage. The monster begins to stagger, giving the girls hope for victory. But since they're so close, the monster opens its mouth, intending to eat the hero alive. But that was exactly what the boy wanted. The moment the palate is exposed, the protagonist activates his energy blast, piercing through the beast's body, since the Minotaur can't reinforce its insides like it does its exterior. Arisa thanks the hero deeply for being there to save her, but he credits the necklace he's wearing. It's the necklace she gave him as a graduation gift in the past. Since Arisa's feelings were inside it, it's likely to turn into stored magical power. So the girl says she's relieved that she managed to get the two of them in sync. That thing in her hair is a magic accessory stone that reacts to let her brother know where she is. So it becomes clear why she always wears it, and the protagonist thanks her for the help. It's said that when he arrived on this floor, he only knew where to go because of a pigeon that flew out of the library. But since that was just a coincidence, the girl doesn't lie and says she didn't plan any of it. Either way, the hero asks if she's Ryoka, which makes her curious about how he knows her name. Then Yudo recalls that she was ranked first in the first annual exam, making her an unforgettable student. He also tells her that she saved him, which only makes him praise her more. But for some reason, Ryoka doesn't seem satisfied. Some time ago, as she walked through the hallways, the girl overheard people gossiping about her awakening. But of all things, she was judged as a jester, the school's powerless sage. And even now, just minutes before being saved, the girl thought the same of the hero. That's why Ryoka is now completely fed up with people like that. That declaration catches the protagonist's attention, but Arisa quickly comes up with some excuse to change the subject. That is, until someone appears, mocking how the group seems to be having fun in this situation. With a weapon strapped to his back, the man approaches and asks if he was left out. Since he doesn't recognize this person, the protagonist shouts for him not to come closer, and the worst part is that the man's magical energy radiates a killing intent. In response, the man asks if they don't know who he is. Ryoka explains that he's Kujo Rekyuji, ranked 2 among S-class adventurers and the guild master known as the White Knight. Then the man praises the girl for knowing so much about him, saying it's expected of a student. Still, the three don't seem very welcoming, but noticing this, the blonde says there's no reason to be so cautious. After all, since he's currently running a national-level mission, he vanishes to return to work. However, that job turns out to be something else entirely when Kujo reappears with his spear pointed at the hero, saying he's going to eliminate him. Outside the school, a girl comments that once again the young master rushed ahead. In response, a man beside her asks if she thinks he'll lose to an A-rank guild. But that's not what she meant, because at the moment, their main objective is making sure the prey doesn't escape. Back in the library, the protagonist is struck directly, and as his sister grows worried, Yudo shouts for her not to come any closer. Still yelling, the hero demands to know why an S-class would want to attack him, but the blonde simply says they're being too loud, and charges in using a type of cloning technique based on illusions. Fortunately, the protagonist manages to dodge the first strike, which surprises the adventurer since his attack should look distorted. And even though he wasn't taking it seriously, the protagonist still managed to dodge it easily, something an A-rank shouldn't be able to do. In that case, the blonde decides to change strategy, now going after Yudo's younger sister first. And in an instant, the blade comes close. But at the last second, the hero throws himself in front of her and shoves the man back with a forceful push, telling him to stop playing around, sending him sliding backward. At that, Kujo becomes curious whether the protagonist is really an A-rank adventurer, so Yudo Kirishima introduces himself as an F-rank adventurer, which at first makes the man laugh nearly uncontrollably. But then it makes the blonde furious for being underestimated like that. The hero, in turn, tries to show his registration card to prove he's not lying. But not caring at all, Kujo charges at him with his skill called Spear of Death. And even though the protagonist dodges, the slash still grazes him slightly, making Yudo realize the hard way that the illusion was real. At that, Kujo asks if it isn't funny, because his ability makes the real false and the false real. Still, the protagonist believes it won't be a problem if he breaks all of them, but the blonde insists it will be meaningless, because somehow he counters the hero's ability with an identical illusion, one that makes Yudo drop to his knees after being hit. With that easy victory, Kujo says the boy is too soft, and Yudo witnesses how terrifying an S-class's power truly is. Regardless, the guy walks toward the girls, commenting that killing a self-proclaimed F-class would be fun. But Kujo finds it more interesting to see the look of despair on Yudo's gentle face. With all his strength, the protagonist tries to stop him but fails, and the blonde declares he'll kill everyone all the same. At that moment, our hero realizes he was wrong. He thought that power was his. But the truth is, he was only able to fight up until now because of the successor. So Yudo wonders if being a sage without magic is really something that belongs to him. As an F-class adventurer, he'll never be able to defeat someone of S-class, so naturally, giving up seems like an option. However, the wisdom of the system asks if he'll really be okay letting things end this way, causing Yudo to reflect. Additionally, the system asks if he's truly okay with losing his sister, finally snapping him back to his senses. Of course, the protagonist screams that he doesn't want anything to happen to her, making the image of the sage proud. And it says that to move forward, he must defeat this guy. Because at some point, Yudo must reach that green field again to protect what's precious to him. That's why the sage advises the protagonist to wish for it with all his strength and strike even harder. That's when the peak of the martial arts sage is finally reached. At the end of the speech, the martial arts sage responds to the successor's firm resolve by offering the inheritance of the celestial sword. A rift in space-time opens in front of the protagonist. Along with that, a warning from the sage appears in the system. If the boy's will falters, his soul will be consumed by the sword's killing intent. But at this point, Yudo no longer cares about the consequences, because ever since that time he made a decision. And that decision was to never again let an opportunity slip away, no matter the cost. So when he grabs the sword from within the rift, a tornado of energy bursts from the ground. All eyes, Kujo's and the girls, are drawn to the new event. On the blonde's face, concern is obvious, and on the girl's, perhaps a flicker of hope. That's because, exuding power, Yudo raises the celestial sword, gathering a massive amount of energy. There are inscriptions on that sword, making it a living weapon, and now, without the slightest hesitation, the protagonist calls Kujo to come in him. Above the skies, there is dawn and dusk, and it's said that no one can bind them. Naturally, all people dream of the skies, and more than that, they dream of reaching the ninth heaven. That's where the celestial sword lies, and now it will be part of our hero's fight to protect Arisa and Ryoka. Arisa is clearly stunned by her brother's situation. The same goes for the blonde, who wonders if this is even the same person as before. In any case, Kujo jokes that powerful weapons always ruin the fun. But before he can continue talking, the protagonist vanishes and, like a flash of light, reappears near Kujo, landing a powerful blow. That same attack sends the S-class crashing into the wall with force, just like what happened to the hero at the beginning. Even while injured, Kujo laughs, thinking this situation is pure madness. But Yudo doesn't respond. It's clear from his expression that he's not joking. Just moments ago, the hero had been getting beaten down one-sidedly, but now everything has changed. Because of that, Kyuka asks if the protagonist is always like this. But even his sister, who's close to him, says she doesn't know because this is the first time she's seen him fight. Still, the girl agrees that the hero really doesn't seem like himself. Back in the fight, the hero asks if the guy would mind leaving quietly without causing a scene. The blonde pretends to consider it for a moment, but of course he yells that there's no way he'll do that, charging in again with his spear. This time, he believes tricks like the last one won't work and remains confident he'll win if he trusts in his spear technique. Over and over again, the blonde attacks, but the protagonist keeps defending and countering his strikes. Kujo tries to strike once more, but Yudo defends himself clearly, not even making much effort. The blonde doesn't know what kind of sword that is, but a sword is still a sword, so spears should have the advantage. However, that wasn't the case, because the protagonist managed to get inside his guard and nearly landed a fatal blow if Kujo hadn't ducked just in time. Quickly, the adventurer repositions himself and takes a stance with his spear to attack again, but the protagonist kicks the weapon, pinning it to the ground. He then jumps, using the shaft of the weapon to gain leverage, and delivers a downward strike that Kujo must strain himself to block. Kujo shouts, asking if the boy isn't afraid. The protagonist's eyes show no hesitation. It seems he has lost his mind, consumed by the sword's aura, and little by little, the hero becomes more reckless, rendering the spear's advantage meaningless. Once again, the blonde narrowly avoids being finished off. At this time, he receives a cut on his right shoulder. In response, he tries to attack in various ways to regain control of the fight. But since he fails to do so, Kujo quickly breaks through one of the walls, running out into the school corridor. So when the protagonist follows him, the blonde feels proud of his strategy to reposition. Face to face with the hero, Kujo admits the boy is truly tough. The blonde admits that if he had known what kind of trick the boy was hiding, he wouldn't have messed with him. But now, he drops his weapon too, to the protagonist's surprise, because Yudo isn't the only one with a card up his sleeve. As he summons his spear, Kujo explains that an illusion is caused by light refraction, and conveniently, This weapon is capable of turning that phenomenon into reality. This is the A-rank weapon known as the Mirage Spear. Promptly, the blonde asks if the hero remembers the first move he used on him during the fight. That's because this weapon perfectly syncs with his innate ability. Additionally, when questioned, Kujo admits that he lured the protagonist into the corridor with the intention of making it impossible to dodge multiple attacks. But if that's the case, the protagonist announces that he'll simply cut through them all at once, which makes the blonde a little disappointed in the boy's lack of tactical thinking. Still, he doesn't oppose the hero's strategy and charges forward, telling him to go ahead and try. Yudo, sword in hand, is convinced that by continuing to seek connection, he can achieve feats greater than anyone else. So without a hint of fear in his eyes, Yudo fires an energy blast with his sword that heads straight toward the clones at high speed. Before impact, the blonde realizes the situation is out of control. Therefore, after the special attack ends, the ground is completely wiped clean, and as an experienced adventurer, Kubujo decides to flee the battle. With no more immediate threats, the girls rush to check on the hero. But before caring about himself, he asks if they're okay, and he's genuinely happy to see that this chaos finally seems to be over. A few seconds later, the blonde's companions ask if he's really going to abandon the mission just because he believes it's an S-class dungeon. But Kujo says there's nothing else that can be done, especially since, as he turns around, it becomes clear that the injuries on his body nearly finish him off. Naturally, the subordinates are curious about what could have hurt their young master that badly. Regardless, Kujo remarks that only fools risk so much for such small gains. With his decision made, the blonde informs his father over the phone that the mission has failed. And apparently his father has a strong personality, given how harshly he criticizes him. Getting straight to the point, Kujo says that if they're going to hire an assassin, it should at least be someone S-class. And even then, the blonde makes it clear it'll be a major challenge, because soon the entire industry will know. Very soon, everyone will witness the rise of the monster with immense power known as Yudo Kirishima. Back at the place where the duel took place, the girls run to check the protagonist's condition, and fortunately, the wounds didn't hit any vital organs. But even so, that mysterious guy still managed to escape. As for the protagonist, Arisa comments that he suddenly became a different person, and the hero replies that it's thanks to that sword. However, just as he's about to show it to the girls, it starts to fade away until it vanishes completely. Apparently, if focus is lost, the sword loses its form. So Yudo explains that it's not something he can use whenever he wants. Suddenly, the phone in the protagonist's pocket rings, which is very strange since the signal isn't reaching there. Unbelievably, the notification is an email from the blonde apologizing for the sudden attack. Naturally, this leaves the protagonist speechless and unsure how to respond. Then a loud noise is heard and the girls duck to protect their heads. With another email, Kujo explains that he forgot to mention he used an item to accelerate the dungeon break. Because of that, the protagonist gets very irritated, but he doesn't have time to feel anything. Suddenly, a monster appears right beneath them all. Faced with this, the hero yells that they need to get out of there, and as for how they'll do that, he asks not to tell the teacher. Because in an instant, he jumps out the window with both girls in his arms, making all three fall several stories to the ground. For some reason, the girls cared more about the property damage, which is exactly why the hero asked them not to snitch. In any case, that monster, which reveals itself to be a giant carnivorous plant, follows the group outside, now face to face with them. Faced with this, the protagonist asks Kyuka to take care of his younger sister. In such a critical situation, the protagonist tries to focus to summon the celestial sword again. However, this time it's not as easy as before, even though he believes he's focused. It's only when Yudo looks back and sees his sister's terrified face that he realizes he's not actually focused. He's panicking. Meanwhile, the monster ignores the group for now because it already has someone captured, Serena, who's about to become a snack for the plant. Seeing this with all his strength, the protagonist charges in, destroying parts of the monster and luckily managing to pull her safely into his arms. By some stroke of luck, the girl is still conscious, though she's coughing a lot, and the hero tells her to rest for now. Before passing out, the girl hands him an item called the Stabilization Ring, which can control a dungeon break. This will be used to absorb the Guardian if its core is attacked, and if everything goes well, it will also put an end to this nightmare. Immediately, our hero understands his mission, and holding the item in his hand, makes it clear he won't let her efforts go to waste. A bit farther away, a car speeds by with Kujo being healed inside. At that moment, there is 1 minute left until the dungeon's total collapse, and when that happens, all of Eastern Japan will be overrun by monsters. So now the fate of this place lies in the hands of our hero, who must first defeat the monster in front of him. This time, the hero's aura sword seems to have grown a bit stronger due to the influence of the celestial sword. Before, it couldn't even scratch an ogre, but now it can easily cut through those tentacles. In that case, the hero wonders if he can really win. But when he looks back, the girls clearly believe in him, so Yudo simply decides to believe too. Quickly, all the monster's damage begins to heal due to its regeneration, and even though he wants to fight, the hero knows he can't go head-on. So he starts by dodging an attack, using the monster's own body as a path to reach its core. But suddenly, a bat-like monster appears to interfere. 20 seconds remain. At 18 seconds, the protagonist finds himself far from the area that had once been so close. But he doesn't give up. To avoid falling, he grabs one of the vines and uses it to launch himself forward with all his strength. At 12 seconds, the protagonist gets very close to the giant carnivorous plant. At 10 seconds, Yudo positions himself above the location of the core, putting him right on the edge of access. Naturally, the countdown begins as the protagonist's attack closes in. At 5 seconds, the defenses around the core are slashed. At 4 seconds, a small crack appears, and at 3 seconds, Yudo pushes even harder. So with just 2 seconds left, a crater finally opens in the core, and the protagonist quickly grabs Serena's item. In the final instant, he presses it against the monster's power source, unleashing a blinding golden light throughout the entire area. In the United States of America, more precisely in the underground Pentagon, inside the Dungeon Management Center, several military personnel are gathered in front of high-tech computers. Immediately, one of the officers announces that Japan is experiencing a dungeon break and alerts the director. Unexpectedly, the director seems pleased, stating that they succeeded in triggering the destruction as planned. It's revealed that Kujo is preparing 5 major US guilds to deploy in Japan and throughout the entire Western Pacific. But suddenly, someone appears saying they want E5. That person is James Blood, known as the highest-ranking American adventurer and leader of the guild strategy. To explain, the man declares that his guild alone will conquer the situation, and the director places his trust in him. After all, if they can govern Japan, they'll gain access to all the dungeons scattered across the Pacific. But that's when something strange begins to happen due to a sudden energy contraction. Because, unexpectedly for them, the dungeon break process dropped to 0%. Obviously, the director yells, saying it makes no sense. Even James becomes curious to know who did it, since even for him, something like that would be difficult. So the only thing he can think of at that moment is that the coalition of the 1,000 strongest guilds has taken action. However, 1 week later at the university hospital, the one responsible for it was there, holding flowers. In that time, the dungeon break stabilized and Minam became a managed dungeon. However, the Silver Wings lost about 90% of their personnel, and all that remained was Serena and a few staff members. By obtaining management rights over the dungeon, they started to earn some profit from the adventurers who began using it. But the hero still believes that no family will be saved with something like that. At that moment, a knock is heard at Serena's recovery room door, so the girl tells the person to come in. That person is our hero, and his presence makes the adventurer visibly happy. Getting straight to the point, the protagonist asks about her recovery, and Serena explains that she'll start rehabilitation the next day, which means she'll be able to return soon, since dungeon exploration is essential to maintain the guild. In that case, with a smile, the hero asks her to contact him whenever she needs help. And about that, Serena seems to have something to say. But just as she's about to speak, the 2 students show up. Naturally disappointed, the protagonist asks how the 2 managed to get in there. So Arisa explains that since she comes by often, she got an access card, which is not the case for the hero. Anyway, Kyuka is relieved to have finally found the protagonist. That's because she shows him something on her phone that seems pretty important. The fact is that after the great achievement, a news story came out about the adventurer, since Yudo gave an interview saying that what motivated him was protecting his beloved. Naturally, Kyuka says this is a huge problem, and to be clear, she explains that he's being misunderstood. But in his mind, there's no issue in declaring his love for his sister. So he asks if there's a problem with expressing his opinion, which only makes the student more flustered. Suddenly, a notification goes off on the girl's phone. Since it came at a bad time, she thinks about deleting her account. But Arisa says she saw the video her friend posted to try to get a job. Naturally, at first there wasn't much engagement, but soon after it increased significantly. On top of that, due to an article that was published, the girl went viral on the internet. So the hero is impressed, since it's impossible to predict how the public will react. But then a strange and very bright light draws attention to the girl's forehead. Without thinking twice, Yudo leans in and asks for permission, which embarrasses her. At that moment, the sage brings through the system a new skill, Divine Revelation, which has the power to predict the future. It's said that Kyuka has the potential to transition to an advanced class, and the condition for that is to gain approximately 300,000 fans. The hero himself had heard of cases where people change professions, but most importantly, if the girl who mastered such a limited class could transition to a better one while keeping her knowledge, she would certainly become something incredible. Naturally, the girl doesn't fully understand the mission, but by remembering the mockery she faced in the past and the rise of the protagonist, she agrees to do whatever it takes if it means she also gets a chance to be reborn. So placing both hands on the hero's shoulders, the girl says that if she goes viral now, things are going to get wild. And since they've come this far, she asks if the boy will take responsibility, which Yudo obviously agrees to. And with that, the path they'll take from now on is decided. For their next video, the protagonist suggests they film a live stream inside a dungeon, which is clearly a pretty bold suggestion from the girl's point of view. Later, heading home before entering, Kyuka hears a curious sound. It's coming from a happy family playing in the neighboring yard. The older sister of a child named Hina tells the younger one that her shoelaces are untied and bends down to teach her how to tie them. But instead of feeling happy, this image of a family becomes a trigger for Kyuka. The girl's sister was a prodigy who awakened 2 professions, while she became just a shadow. However, even someone overlooked had her moment the day she aced an important school exam. Because of that, her mother congratulated her, though still with little enthusiasm since Kyuka didn't have the same abilities as Hibiki. Still, that small recognition was enough to make the girl want to keep doing her best. But after that, her sister became an adventurer instead of attending high school, quickly rising to S rank and abandoning the family. Unfortunately, Kyuka had to bear all of her parents' expectations alone, which became a real burden. Having awakened a completely useless power, daily humiliation became routine. And in a completely twisted way, her mother associated the girl's bad luck with hatred toward them, something Kyuka tried to clarify. But to her mother, it was Kyuka's fault that Hibiki had left. The girl's class is called Playboy. As the name suggests, it only serves to perform silly tricks. To fix her situation, Kyuka thought maybe she should focus on her studies again, but reality was cruel. Because on a random day, she received a note in which her parents disowned her. And even after reading such an absurd message, the girl didn't respond with anger. She cried, hoping to become a wonderful adventurer and bring her family back. This ends up being a very painful moment for the girl as she recalls her past, but it also reignites her determination. In a mid-level dungeon called the Clear Sky Tower, Yudo meets up with Kyuka. At this moment, the girl is curious to know if her subscriber count will increase, so the hero assures her that the strategy will work. The video sharing site called TechTech is a platform that rapidly grew thanks to adventure-related content, and the hottest category right now is live dungeon exploration streams. First, the girl sets up the camera, but the hero notices it's set to portrait mode, which, although not terrible, prompts the boy to approach and change it. Yudo explains that it's better to watch horizontally on a phone to get a wider view of the dungeon. Kyuka then comments that he seems to have a lot of experience, which the hero confirms without revealing he stayed up all night studying for her. In any case, the two proceed to enter the dungeon. The moment they step inside, the stream begins, already with a few viewers. Because of that, the girl greets everyone, but the viewers focus on praising the dude's appearance. Suddenly, someone makes a donation, so both thank them, saying part of the support will be donated to cover dungeon disaster expenses. It seems the audience is gathering, which makes it necessary to begin quickly. Today, the two will hunt rabbits on the first floor of the Clear Sky Tower, and the goal is to defeat 20 of them in 1 minute. Kyuka, however, feels a lot of pressure because if she fails, she fears the audience will abandon her. But Yudo simply asks if she's ready and immediately gives the signal, prompting everyone to cheer for her. Kyuka quickly makes a set of cards appear in her hand, and since it's not a pigeon, the audience gets confused. Unexpectedly, these cards are sharp enough to pierce the monster's bodies. This is the only offensive ability of Playboy, which is quite concerning. Still, the girl understands there's no use doubting herself now. She has to give it everything she's got. Kyuka charges with another card attack, but unexpectedly, her deck is sliced in half by a monster. And to her surprise, it's a Vorpal rabbit, a more advanced species. In response, the rabbit charges at her in an instant. As the girl runs, protecting her head, viewers comment that someone needs to help and that she looks really cute. In that moment, Yuno apologizes for letting this happen, and with terrifying speed, defeats the monster in a single blow. Right after, Kyuka bursts into tears because it was supposed to be an easy mission, and the protagonist apologizes again. Then the girl says she'll only forgive him if he buys her a cappuccino on the way back. Breaking that sweet moment, Yudo suddenly senses something approaching and pulls the girl aside to dodge. No one was supposed to be armed in there, but even so, a knife is stabbed into the ground. Yudo quickly demands that whoever is hiding nearby come out. Then the hooded figure comments that it's exactly like the rumors. He says something about the Zero Sage, and the viewers get confused, wondering if it's all staged. But soon the enemy appears behind Kyuka, pointing a knife at her, causing collective panic in the chat. Even before the girl realizes it, the hooded figure pierces her neck slightly, and fortunately, before the worst can happen, the protagonist intervenes using his powers to fire a projectile at the enemy. It hits the head, making the two believe they had managed to win with that attack. Naturally, the hooded figure wouldn't be defeated that easily, and even after being hit, the hole in his head is hollow, to the hero's surprise. At that moment, other people begin emerging from a nearby bush, and with them is a giant spider monster. Kyuka explains that these people are puppeteers, a troublesome profession that manipulates magical puppets to attack. Suddenly, a system quest appears, asking the hero to defeat the assassin in exchange for 100 coins. What catches Kyuka's attention is the name, and for Yudo, the fact that it's not a message from the sage's system. To make things worse, someone from a distant location begins making calculated comments on the live stream. All of them are discouraging, saying there's no other choice but to run. Suddenly, a massive wave of negative comments floods in, betting on the deaths of the two. However, the protagonist simply ignores it, because basically, if they find the real body, they'll be fine. Smiling, our hero thinks it's a good strategy to fight while the girl gives the instructions. Obviously, the assassin doesn't believe the protagonist plans to defeat him alone. But the hero replies that he's not alone, which unfortunately only makes the enemy mock Ryoka, leaving her feeling pretty hurt. In this case, Yudo understands that the playboy profession may be seen as just foolishness, but he makes it clear that the assassins will be just as useless, which infuriates the enemy. Shouting all kinds of insults, the enemy charges forward with his puppets. But since the boy needs to protect someone this time, he focuses his senses and concentrates enough to summon the celestial sword once again. With his weapon in hand, the protagonist charges forward, impressing Ryoka greatly, because the protagonist's strategy was to provoke the enemy to draw all attention to himself. With that, he managed to keep them from concentrating around her, even without being sure of victory. So the girl begins to believe that this is the attitude of someone who trusts her, which is completely different from her family in the past. Ryoka understands better than anyone how terrifying it is to be pressured into success. But even though it's frightening, the girl thinks carefully about what she's feeling and smiles as she realizes that she's actually happy. No longer standing still, the girl summons a huge number of pigeons that begin flying past the warriors. Obviously, the enemy mocks it, saying it's useless no matter how many animals there are. But Kyuka ignores him and asks the protagonist to keep the enemy distracted. Then the full concentration and energy begins to radiate, and she hopes the camera is recording everything well, because now she believes that even she can do something incredible if she tries. The Playboy class is known for being extremely difficult to succeed with alone, but its essence lies in support abilities like distraction. At this moment, the girl can even share vision with the pigeons, the result of daily training put to good use. And within seconds, one of the pigeons finds the enemy's location. And right when the 8 o'clock direction is given, the protagonist cuts through a tree and passes through it, chasing the opponent at high speed. The feeling of being caught up to naturally sends the assassin into panic, but there's nothing he can do about it, because once Yudo reaches the controller object of the puppeteer, it's destroyed by the celestial sword, causing the enemy to fall to his knees. With victory in the hero's hands, Kyuka calls out the hooded man for what he said about her ability, and suddenly a pigeon lands on the enemy's head, responsible for delivering his punishment, prompting the chat to reconsider how good that class might actually be. In any case, Yudo makes a secret request to his friend, and even though she finds it pretty embarrassing, the hero insists. So Yudo starts by striking a pose while saying that justice transcends dimensions. Then Kyuka repeats the movement and adds that feelings also transcend dimensions. And so the two finish in a synchronized pose, ending the broadcast with the viewers laughing uncontrollably. Later that evening, the protagonist praises Kyuka's great work, and the two exchange thanks with a handshake. With that, the hero says they should head back, but before leaving, the girl insists on thanking him once again. Yudo, in turn, says they were only able to achieve victory because of her instructions. But that's not exactly what the girl was referring to. Anyway, she sets that aside and brings up another subject to explain herself better. Kyuka asks if she really heard Yudo calling her by her first name just a moment ago. Then quickly, the protagonist apologizes, saying he didn't realize it. But she wasn't trying to criticize him for that, much to our hero's surprise. Instead, she clarifies with a smile that from now on, Yudo can just call her Suzuka. Back in that dark room where the negative comments came from, a woman remarks that the two of them did a good job cleaning things up. And even though she finds it all very amusing, the girl believes she should meet Suzuka in person soon. Sometime after the recent events, Suzuka finally passes the 2 million mark and Yudo congratulates her via message. He also encourages her to keep working hard to find a job, which makes Ryuko reply with a tired sticker. Meanwhile, at home, the hero says he also needs to do his best. Later, another message arrives. Lately, every guild wants to use him as a promotional star. So since they don't really see him as an adventurer, Yudo angrily kicks a can into the trash. Thinking of Arisa, the money is tempting, but as she wisely said, it's not a good idea to give in to temptation. Yudo wants to explore more dungeons that no one has conquered yet, so he wonders if that's too luxurious a desire, but he still believes it's okay. After all, supposedly, he is an adventurer. Suddenly, a message from Serena arrives on his phone, and she says to meet her at the old secondary school, which makes our hero curious. Regardless, he heads to the place, which now houses the dungeon management office. Only a few months have passed since then, but the place is already fully operational. At that moment, an older woman appears and asks if she's speaking with Kirishima. Saying she's been waiting for him, she tells him she'll guide him to Serena's location. As they walk, the protagonist asks if it's really safe for ordinary people to walk in a place like this, and the woman explains that it is. Besides, she believes that in any emergency, she'd be protected by the hero. Without further delay, the woman introduces herself as the mother of Yumino, a former member of the Silver Wings. Even though he doesn't know her name, Yudo understands very well what happened to the guild. The mother says her son saw Yudo in a dungeon called Twilight Castle, and ever since, he kept talking about him. With deep guilt in his heart, the protagonist suddenly yells, apologizing for not arriving sooner. For a moment, the woman considers his words, but then asks the boy not to deceive himself. After all, he alone wouldn't have been enough to save the 89 fallen members, something that leaves the hero speechless. In any case, the woman says it's not entirely his fault, so he doesn't have to carry the burden alone. Moreover, while the boy reflects, the mother says her son would have been happy just knowing Yudo was the one who stopped the dungeon, because to him, the protagonist was his greatest hero. At the end of that conversation, Serena finally appears and the two say goodbye to the woman until they are completely alone. To break the ice, the girl asks if the place isn't incredible, since, By adjusting your magic, you can even change the weather and climate. But just behind her is a memorial, and it reminds her of all the companions she lost. It said they were granted the authority to manage dungeons, but she honestly doesn't know if she can call that a victory. Facing this dilemma, Yudo suggests they consider the outcome a victory, if only for the sake of their fallen companions. At this point, if there are just a few things he can protect with his own hands, the hero says he at least wants to move forward without losing them. Serena understands his point and smiles, agreeing to think the same way. After all, in the end, all that's left for the two of them is to breathe slowly. Changing the subject, the girl asks if she can say something strange, and when he agrees, she summons a wand. Because right now, she's inviting the protagonist to a serious duel between the two of them. Even though Yudo is surprised at first, he says he won't hold back. So the two face each other before the battle begins. For a long time, Serena had been wondering whether the hero really was a sage, and hearing that from her left him speechless. In this case, Serena just laughs and fires 4 orbs of electric magic in Yudo's direction. Noticing them approaching quickly, the protagonist dodges, prompting Serena to comment that this kind of instant prediction is really troublesome. Yudo, in turn, intends to first distract the girl toward the left side in order to create an attack from the right. However, his prediction told him that something like that wouldn't lead to success. Therefore, the hero decided to reverse the play and attack from the left, but even so, he didn't see himself winning, which naturally led him to retreat to come up with a better strategy. Yudo begins to panic, not understanding how the girl is surpassing his predictions. Then Serena asks if the boy can't even handle a delicate lady, to which Yudo responds by running in her direction, asking her not to play around right now. If the girl is reading his actions, the hero believes he can use brute force to disarm her. However, Serena keeps smiling without even trying to move, and that's because she easily blocks the blow with her magic wand. Quite proud of her strength, the girl points out that the hero's master is yelling behind him, prompting Yudo to ask how she knows that. But the girl's response is a kick straight through her opponent's defenses, launching him backward with force. And just as she said, the martial arts stage was angry. Serena finds the hero's strategy of jumping back to reduce the impact interesting, even laughing a little at it, which puts Yudo on high alert. In the end, our hero admits how difficult the battle is, realizing this might be the toughest opponent he's faced since his awakening. Amused by the situation, the girl remembers she hasn't yet told him her profession. So considering the wand and magical shooting attacks, Yudo suggests she might be a conductor, and he's right. It's a rare class that reads battlefield conditions and guides allies with commands. Even though it's a good class, it's not as rare as the sage. Still lacking information, the hero asks what he should do. The girl explains that the conductor is literally the one who guides and unites the team. Now Serena asks if the protagonist will let her hear his melody. Suddenly, a skill called Symphony begins to play, enveloping the entire battlefield. Then the protagonist dodges all the incoming attacks quickly. Despite that, Serena warns that there's no point in running, and then a larger musical note explodes, creating a shockwave. With that, the girl uses the opening to attack again, and several times her blows almost land on our hero, until Yudo, without even noticing, is eventually backed into a wall. In that moment, the girl focuses all her attacks on a single point and naturally manages to defeat the hero with that strategy. Serena explains that in a duel, it's crucial to understand the rhythm, as well as the opponent's breathing and movement, because both in battle and music, there's a flow. So one must not let opponents do whatever they want, but instead perceive and control the opponent's movements. From that, Yudo understands that the reason his instant prediction wasn't working was because his breathing patterns were being read. But when it comes to what he should do to overcome this situation, the girl says the hero should already know, because she hears a beautiful sound inside him saying it wants to fly freely like an adventurer. Either way, the girl drops the conversation and prepares for a final strike. However, now that our hero stops to think about what was said, the sage contributes by telling him to enjoy his freedom and that she will be by his side. With a quick reflection, the protagonist manages to understand the meaning behind it all. Just like the girl read each attack's flow, rhythm, and timing, Yudo prepares to create a new flow with a completely free improvisation, and Serena immediately notices a change in the protagonist's behavior. With deep concentration, Yudo understands that he shouldn't be fighting in a way that worries others. In the end, he'd been carrying too much without realizing it, which made people easily place their trust in him. But now the hero decides to keep a calm heart and quickly deflects an attack coming his way, determined to follow the advice and enjoy the fight. With a bold move, the protagonist starts walking on top of the musical note attack. Then as he quickly approaches the girl, he fires 2 energy blasts beside her. And in a very creative way, he solidifies the energy to use it as a pole for vaulting. This way, the protagonist gains a favorable position above his opponent. What instead of making Serena desperate actually makes her very proud, so she throws her wand up in the air, giving up the fight. A few seconds later, the two lie down and talk about the battle, reflecting on their own mistakes. Serena comments that the greatest weakness of a conductor is not having final attack since it's fundamentally a support profession. Then the hero reveals that he was very worried about his career as an adventurer. However, thanks to Serena's help, he can now smile with a much clearer mind. And even though she's happy with the recognition, the girl stands up and says there's no need to thank her. After all, she's also satisfied since she had always wanted a duel with our hero. In any case, Serena takes the chance to get the hero's attention, making him quite nervous. And unexpectedly, she asks if the boy is interested in joining the Silver Wings. Honestly, she had wanted to say that ever since Yudo came to visit her in the hospital. It said that the guild's philosophy is to rise and fly into the vast sky without being held back by anything. So Yudo reflects on what it means for an adventurer to keep flying high. Either way, Serena believes that kind of mindset is perfect for the boy. But before anything else, the protagonist asks if he can make a request, and just as the girl agrees, Yudo asks that they don't stop him from continuing to move forward. After all, with the power he received, he truly wants to test how high he can climb to one day reach the greatest peak for an adventurer. With that, Serena simply extends her hand to seal the deal, because with a smile, she asks if they'd really be able to stop the hero, which makes him happy enough to shake her hand. And so, with both of them thankful for their meeting, Yudo became a member of the Silver Wings. At night, while the protagonist was asleep, he suddenly woke up in a strange dream. In a white room, he began to wonder where he was until he heard a voice calling him, much to his surprise. Yudo shouted, asking who it was, but all he could see was a massive gate sealed with chains. Even though it seemed bold, the voice claimed to be the protagonist's predecessor. Then a system message appeared, asking if the boy would accept the mysterious sage. But clearly, the atmosphere was different from the previous sages. Faced with that, the voice asked why the boy was hesitating, since he was being given such a good opportunity. And that naturally made Yuto agree, since everything from the system had helped him so far. However, before he could accept, both the martial arts sage and the knowledge sage shouted at Yuto not to get involved with this one. Then the mysterious voice itself dismissed the warnings from his peers, calling them weak. With no one left to interrupt, the voice recalled that Yuto intends to go into the unknown dungeon. So an artificial image is generated showing Serena collapse beside the boy. Then the same happens with Arisa because the way Yuto is now, he won't be able to protect everyone. Even Kyuka appears to further manipulate the hero's vision, and all of this serves as justification for the voice's plea to be inherited. Then at the end of this construction, once again the system message of the sage appears. Yuto slowly brings his hand closer to confirm, and the voice praises him, claiming they'll conquer everything together. But at the very last second, someone stops the protagonist from making that decision, much to his surprise. And the most unexpected thing of all is that it's the very incarnation of the Sage of Knowledge. In this case, the sage inside the gate grows tired of the delay and breaks a gap in the seal to strike Yuto in his own way. But fortunately, our hero is pushed away by the same man who had helped him before. And so, as Yuto watched helplessly, the Sage of Knowledge was imprisoned in his place. Yet even in that situation, instead of panicking, all he said was light for the final successor. Until finally he was devoured into the gate, which then closed again after just a few seconds. The moment that gate closed, our hero woke up in his bed, startled, realizing it had been a dream. For now, he tried to understand what that dark figure was and who the other person had been. But in his mind, the image of the sage was vague and the memories felt hazy. The next day at the Silver Wings Guild headquarters, a meeting takes place with 6 members present. At the center of the table, Serena welcomes Yudo to his new guild. But before anything else, she asks the boy to explain what guild means to him. Then, due to his difficult past, the hero replies that it's basically a business that exploits adventurers with low wages, which inevitably leaves the girls feeling a little embarrassed. Either way, Serena explains that guilds are organizations that take on dungeon-related work. With the adventurer rankings, guilds are classified from S to F, and the jobs vary according to the classification. For them, dungeons make up the majority of their revenue, and for a while, they'll have to rely on rental fees from Old Alliance South High School. In that case, the hero asks what the annual estimate is, and since only high-level adventurers can do this, that same lady from earlier shows the estimate to Yudo on her laptop. And unexpectedly, the total needed for someone like a hero would be around 900 billion. So while the protagonist's soul leaves his body, Serena has to explain that it was just a forecast. Anyway, it's said that now it's time for the main event. To maintain an A-rank guild, at least 2 adventurers of the same rank must be registered. But because of the recent incident, they need to find someone other than Serena, which will be quite difficult since there aren't many A-rank adventurers available. However, at that moment, all the girls turn directly toward our hero, bringing an idea with a shout that echoes through the whole building. Obviously, the easiest option now is to have the protagonist take the exam to rank up. Yudo finds the idea of becoming A-rank terrifying, but first they'll need to build up his achievements. So Serena asks Mrs. Laminov to bring the materials, which are soon stacked in front of the protagonist in huge piles. From behind them, Serena comments with a smile that the hero must complete everything within 3 months. So with that massive pile in front of his eyes, Yuto tries to seek some confirmation that the other girls avoid eye contact, which makes the hero think that Serena is a boss who oppresses her subordinates. Sometime later, in an A-rank dungeon called the Count's Dream Trace, since our hero heard that Serena hired help for this mission, he believes he arrived early. But it's at that moment that Canada appears, saying it's been a while. Turns out he's the helper. To catch up, the blonde guy mentions that he joined the Abyss Guild as an intern, but he also says he can't afford to fall behind even a little, which makes Yuto worried about this competitiveness. Either way, Yuto says it's all pretty reassuring, and since no one's watching today, the hero says his partner doesn't need to worry about messing up for nerves. Though slightly irritated, the blonde keeps his composure and just advises Yuto not to hesitate like last time if he really wants to reach A rank, which makes the protagonist even more certain that he can trust him. With nothing more to talk about, the two decide to tackle this cursed dungeon. Sometime later, on the final floor of the Count's dungeon, the warriors face off against the boss, and in an instant, they get close to unleashing a super powerful combo strike that could be decisive in this fight. That's why, right after the attack, the blonde turns and asks if they managed to beat it. But the reality was that the monster was still standing tall, and more than that, it was laughing at the two of them. The protagonist is the first to realize that the situation is bad, but also the first to be hit by the monster's counterattack, which also hits the blonde, knocking both of them to the ground and nearly defeated. Canada hadn't expected that the Count would instantly solidify his blood to create a weapon, and the hero realizes the previous attack had been a trap to lure them in for a simultaneous blow. Either way, the vampire begins to drain the blood of both warriors, and using some kind of telekinesis, he reshapes the liquid into a powerful spear meant to finish them off. This is an S-rank monster of the vampire lord species named Vlad Astra. Naturally, the blonde realizes that the guy powered up his spear by drinking their blood, and the hero adds that the more they bleed, the stronger the enemy becomes. If that's the case, Yuto says he'll have to cut deep enough that the vampire won't be able to regenerate, and Canada agrees, saying they'll slice him in half. So while the hero charges from the front, the blonde runs to the flanks. With one on each side of the vampire, our hero rushes in to make the first move. But Vlad is laughing as if he had already anticipated this and was ready to counter. Then, all of a sudden, the hero's instant prediction ability breaks, and that vampire vanishes, which causes the two boys to be unable to stop in time and crash into each other. Canada becomes outraged by this, so Yuto apologizes, saying that Vlad has disappeared. However, the blonde is certain that the hero is someone who could see through all of this. Yuto starts thinking about what skill he had been about to use before, but he quickly realizes that relying too much on his abilities is wrong because he lacks actual combat sense. In the end, it's exactly what Serena said, and the same thing that happened against the Lancer. The hero won using the Celestial Sword, but that wasn't his own power. It was more like an automated battle. That's why, if he wants to pursue his goals, the boy can't simply depend on his skills. Seeing the hero's confused expression, the blonde comments that the Yuto he knows is confident. After all, in any situation, he always finds the best move to make. Hearing something like that from his friend makes the protagonist reflect again, and naturally, he affirms in his mind that he just needs to do his best now, because that's the only thing he can do. Back in the fight, the monster begins controlling blood again, creating many stingers that rise from the ground. Because of that, the warriors have to dodge at the last second to avoid being impaled alive. However, the fact that the part of the stinger that touches the sunlight disappears draws the protagonist's attention to a nearby window. That's because, conveniently, it's already daytime outside now. And since that's the case, the protagonist yells for his companion to stop the vampire's movements for a moment. Although he doesn't like it because it sounds like an order, Canada complies, planting his sword into the ground and saying it feels like child's play to him. Using his taunt ability, the blonde yells for the enemy to come at him. Vlad quickly charges forward, ready to impale the Holy Knight, but Canada holds the weapon, which excites the protagonist. Then he prepares his aura blade and throws it with all his strength toward the upper part of the mansion. And the moment a crack is made in the ceiling, light inevitably pours in. And since the vampire is caught right in the middle of it, Vlad Astra comes into contact with his greatest weakness, the sun, and is disintegrated instantly, leaving behind nothing but his ashes on the mansion floor. Seeing this, the blonde comments that they managed to win, and the hero is thankful for their luck. Even so, in the end, the hero couldn't defeat him alone, so he thinks that his goal of becoming rank A is still far away. And unexpectedly, a system message appears agreeing. It's a message from the martial arts sage. At the moment he appears, the protagonist is very surprised. Wasting no time, the sage comments that the hero still lacks a lot of experience since he relies too much on his power. Although he wants to argue at first, he accepts that this is the truth. Regardless, the sage states that the circumstances have changed, so he can no longer just watch from the sidelines. To explain, he asks if the boy remembers a dream he had recently. It was exactly that dream with a gate sealed by chains. It's said that the limit is approaching, but before that, the protagonist needs to become stronger. Fortunately, regarding that, the martial arts sage opens a portal and says he will train the boy personally. Then the offer is left up to the hero's will and saying there's no need to ask. Yuto accepts, which makes the martial arts sage quite proud. Before leaving, however, the protagonist tells the blonde that he's entering a danger zone now, and since it's very dangerous, he asks Canada to stay behind. The blonde, for his part, has no idea what's going on, but also asks not to be underestimated. In general, he understood that Yudo was going to get stronger, so he declared that he could be left out. So the sage agreed to take both warriors, who must now overcome this new challenge together. Thrown inside the portal, the boys fall to the ground and get up without knowing where they are. However, the protagonist comments that this is where the master said she would train him. Looking closer, the blonde points behind them because a giant tree is visible. And there, a message says this place is the White World, where 1 year here equals 1 day on Earth. Even so, time alone won't be enough, so Canada asks where the master is, which instantly brings a terrifying sensation over the warriors because suddenly the girl materializes right in the middle of the White Hall, surrounded by dark energy. And it's at that moment that the hero introduces the blonde to their new master. Canada admits he thought the master would be some muscular guy or an old wise man. So to break that stereotype, the martial arts sage steps forward, getting just a palm's distance from the blonde. And with a kung fu technique, the 1-inch punch, she hits Canada square in the chest, making him pass out and die according to the system. Yudo becomes extremely furious, but when he tries to create an aura sword, a message says that abilities are restricted in this place. And even after trying several more times, the same message keeps repeating. So the girl calls them both crazy, since this training is precisely meant to teach them not to rely on abilities, which, although it was the hero's goal, caught him off guard. Without wasting more time, the martial artist charges at the protagonist, attacking with just one finger. A few seconds later, the blonde wakes up asking what happened, and when he looks to his side, he sees Yudo lying down with a death message. The sage explains that if the blonde doesn't want to die like that again, he needs to attack with everything he's got, and with the literal intention of dying in the process. Canada is somehow amused by how insane his friend's master is, and since it means they're going to die either way, he decides to go down fighting. But it wouldn't be that easy, because the sage strikes back and sends the boy flying. And since it's the protagonist who wakes up this time, the girl signals for him to come at her already, which leads to several consecutive defeats for the two adventurers at the hands of the master. In just a few minutes, they had already reached a death count of 10, which the sage found pathetic. But even they started doubting their abilities, so the girl said crying wouldn't help. Either way, feeling a bit of empathy, she decides to change things up a little. From now on, the one who manages to withstand a hit will earn the right to learn a secret technique, something that makes both of them very curious. Quickly, the boys remove the heavy clothes that were limiting their movement until they're ready to fight. The sage, on the other hand, mocks the gesture but praises their greed, because stealing techniques in search of limitless strength and defeating the martial arts sage is exactly the training they're doing here, which she hopes can be accomplished while the death count is still low. Though a bit worried, both accept the challenge, but soon the hero's death count rises to 45, and with time, the blonde had already died nearly 300 times to the martial arts sage. Eventually, that number rose to 800 and close to 2,000, 3 times more, 5 times more, pushing the counter sky high. Even so, the two remain determined to fight and complete their objective. In the end, the martial arts sage doesn't teach them any technique, but the countless experiences of death gave them what they needed to learn. For the blonde, there were just too many techniques, and he couldn't steal them all alone. Still, while fighting, he stays determined to at least master half. Then suddenly, he lands a blow that opens the girl's defenses. Quickly, the blonde shouts to the protagonist that it's his chance. And because of the sheer number of times he fought, Yudo replicates the 1-inch punch technique. Since there were so many techniques, the two decide to combine their halves, because that's the only way they'll be able to reach the master. Finally, the martial arts sage falls to her knees before the boys, who are initially confused, but soon become very excited when they realize they've achieved the goal of their training. Faced with that, the sage feels relieved because for a long time she had been furious with the hair over his pathetic skills. However, since the energy they now give off is completely different, the master has to admit how good the two have become. Wasting no more time, the sage asks if they should head back soon. And very enthusiastically, they agree, but not before getting a one-on-one win over her, which makes the girl pause to think, but then she bursts out laughing. And with that, she calls the boys forward, telling them to come at her again. Back in the real world, in the same dungeon they had left, it's already nighttime, so the protagonist asks how many hours have passed. The blonde comments that he's starting to feel jet-lagged. Either way, from a puddle of blood on the floor, something suddenly begins to rise. Then, as he observes the strange shape in front of him, the protagonist asks what it is. But no explanation is needed because soon the thing begins to float, and from the blood orbs, Vlad Astra reappears once again, which left both boys very surprised since the enemy was still alive. Even though it seemed like a desperate situation, the hero comments that it's perfect. After all, this is the best chance they could have to show the results of their training. The vampire, on the other hand, is irritated by the boys' confidence and curses in an unknown language. But while he's still talking, the protagonist appears in front of him like a lightning bolt. And before he can react, he punches the Count square in the chest, making him cough up blood from the impact. Yudo happily remarks that it's working, but the blonde believes he's cheating. Either way, not wanting to be left behind, Canada charges in as well and using his skills, strikes the vampire, this time sending him flying. The blonde is very surprised to be able to fight without using any ability. But in contrast, the vampire is more furious than ever, and suddenly he plunges his own arm into his chest and rips out his heart. Then he crushes it with his own hands, turning even his skin the color of blood. And so the immortal king awakens as a powerful SSL-ranked monster. Vlad Astra continues speaking in strange tongues while experiencing his new power. However, the sensation is short-lived as the two warriors rush in and pierce through the vampire with a combined attack, which unexpectedly is enough to defeat him for good, triggering a new system conquest message. Already outside the dungeon, our hero comments that the day was really exhausting. But that was obvious since from afternoon to night, they went through years of training. In any case, because of that, the two got a little closer to their goal, and that's something the blonde agrees with immediately. A little closer to the sea, Kaname says he has something to share before the two part ways. It's said that a large-scale combat operation takes place every 4 years. And in that very operation, Canada will be participating, to the protagonist's surprise. Having said that, the blonde suggested it would be a shame if the protagonist didn't join, and so he stated that he'd be waiting for him. Then he said goodbye, claiming that the next time they met, they'd be rivals, something that made Yuto reflect. Later on, our hero finally arrives home where Arisa informs him that Suzuka is there to visit him. While the protagonist changes clothes, the friend apologizes for coming so late. So Yuto says he'll walk her to the station after taking a quick shower. But he doesn't notice that his muscular body now catches the attention of the two girls, who leave thinking this sudden change is very strange. Regardless, our hero takes his shower calmly, reflecting as he looks into the mirror. Before his training, the boy had a lot of trouble against Vlad Astra, but now he was able to defeat him in an instant. On top of that, he didn't need to use any of his skills, just his own strength. Therefore, the hero thinks that now he might be capable of aiming for bigger things like a possible S rank. And without forgetting what his comrades said when they parted, Yuto mentally asks him to wait. As the days passed, our hero's achievements were remarkable, completing several missions in a row. The news became so relevant that it even reached the Kuju Group's headquarters, specifically the CEO's office. Kauda, the CDO of the Kuju Group, still doesn't believe Yudo can be trusted. However, an advisor says otherwise, since the administration of a dungeon must belong to an S-rank guild, which Kauda agrees with, praising his colleague's reasoning. Either way, a tablet is placed on the table showing an image of the hero alongside Kuju and 4 others. In recent years, guilds from all over the world have fiercely fought in the large-scale combat operation, and this time Kauda wants Kirishima Yudo to participate. The advisor asks if there's nothing else, since the slot in Japan was supposed to go to the CEO's son. However, it's revealed that the Lancer in question deserted the United States. Either way, the real goal is to use this opportunity to eliminate Yudo, since without him it'll be easy to seize the school's dungeon. Then the man says he'll start making preparations, and the CEO says he'll be counting on him. That man is the A-rank hunter Koji Tsukishiro, leader of the Abyss Guild. Among a pile of mission papers, they all have something in common, the mission complete stamp. Because of that, and with the deposits already empty, Serena comments in a meeting room that she always knew our hero had potential. But she really didn't expect him to complete everything in such a short time. Yudo is now a C-rank adventurer, and beyond that, the marketing is great since, despite more than 100 adventurers having signed up to participate, it was our hero who secured first place in the event called Next Adventurer. Yudo, in turn, says he didn't plan any of this, but it's proof that his hard work is being recognized. At that moment, at 10:35, the phone in the place rings, and when Serena asks who's calling, she's surprised by the answer, because it's none other than Kaji from the Abyss Guild. As a special guest, the guy has a conversation with both the hero and the girl, and he doesn't waste time handing over a briefcase full of money to persuade Serena about his proposal. Kaji says it's a little gift for all the help, especially from the hero. Either way, the girl thinks that's still too much for a reward, and Kuji praises her perception. In fact, now he's going to show the real reason he came, and when they look at the laptop screen, both are shocked, because it's a summons for a large-scale combat operation. Knowing what this means, Serena panics, thinking he doesn't stand a chance. But quite persuasively, Kabuji says he wouldn't have come personally if that were the case. Besides, the protagonist has been trying to build a reputation, and this is a one-of-a-kind opportunity, a national competition, and something the boy had mentioned some time ago. So seeing the hero thinking it over, Kuji praises him for considering it. Around 40 years ago, a continental dungeon appeared, something so serious that Yudo even learned about it in school history classes. But now Kuji says he'll tell the real story. After a brutal battle with the whole world cooperating, the island became a controlled dungeon and was later named Atlantis when the war ended. However, one issue still remained, which sparked Yudo's curiosity. Naturally, there was a dilemma about which country would control operations in Atlantis, because the country able to operate this large-scale dungeon would gain benefits never seen before. Almost every nation that took part in the war demanded their share, which nearly started another war. At that moment, a massive black energy orb appeared in Parliament, And as the politicians were trying to understand what was happening, it just kept growing. That day, a mission was issued by the system to determine who would manage Atlantis, and the rule was that each country must send 5 representatives. Hearing that, the protagonist yells out asking which country is behind this, but that's still unknown, and at the time, everyone decided to use it to their advantage. In the end, the rules of the mission never change. Each participant receives a badge with a number, and at some point, they are randomly teleported to Atlantis. Adventurers must then compete to steal badges while heading toward the center of the island. Yuto, in turn, asks what's in the center, and Kuji explains that 8 doors lead to the main arena. So only the 8 adventurers with the most badges can pass through to the main event. Basically, it's a race, but if someone runs too fast to the gates, they might be overtaken by competitors with more badges. In the end, it's a tactical battle, and obviously, if an adventurer doesn't meet the requirements, they'll be eliminated. All 8 winners will fight until one remains, the representative of the country that will manage the dungeon. Then the hero asks why they don't just send S-rank adventurers. Serena explains that participants must be under 25 years old, so not only are there few strong adventurers at that age, but the guilds don't want to risk injuring them. However, reaching the final stage will earn a person recognition as an A-rank adventurer, and the winner will receive an international S-rank license. So Serena immediately recalls the Silver Wings philosophy, and considering they never let opportunities slip by, without needing to think much, both the girl and our hero accept the challenge. Later, in the center of Atlantis, many people are gathered for the national competition that takes place every 4 years. And to present the event, the host named Lucas will be the one handling that role. By the way, he's currently unemployed, but thanks to the linguistic unification skill provided by magic, he got this job. Getting straight to the point, the participants are currently waiting in their respective countries. However, the host reminds the participants to take care of any personal needs right away. Lucas informs them that the badge each of them received has the effect of forcefully teleporting them to the island. Therefore, it is extremely important that no one shows up there in an embarrassing state. Now, to kick things off, the event will begin with an exhibition match, where they will invite the most suitable person to the stage. That person is the champion of the previous competition and representative of the United Arab Emirates, the so-called Amir Mukhtar. And as soon as he appears, he apologizes for keeping the audience he loves so much waiting. It is said that last time he demonstrated overwhelming power to secure the championship. After all, he has a unique job that allows him to transform parts of his body into a dragon. In the end, it's not really a job, but rather a species, and that form, even after 4 years, is impossible to forget. Before anything else, Lucas asks if Amir has anything to say to the world and to the adventurers. But for some reason, the man doesn't respond, leaving an awkward silence in the air. That is until he suddenly acts, grabbing the camera with his claws unexpectedly. Looking directly into the lens, he says he's not satisfied with his previous victory, because what he seeks is the #1 spot in the adventurer ranking. It's also revealed that today's opponent is someone he personally invited, and that there's no need for teleportation, because he's already right above them all. From a high-speed jet, the greatest adventurer in the world descends without a parachute, landing in the middle of the arena completely unharmed. This is the hero known as James Blood, representative of the United States. While watching on TV, Yuto, who seems to be a huge fan, is in awe. Suzupitu, surprised to see him in such a setting. However, the fact that the hero is so fascinated is a bit strange. Stating that, Serena asks Sarisa what's wrong with Yuto, and the sister reveals that lately he's been researching the fighting styles of other adventurers. And that's exactly why there's so much James merchandise around the place. Yuto definitely became a fan, and now watching the fight between the two is like a dream come true. Back in the arena, Amir comments that he's been waiting for this moment for a long time, and immediately charges forward, saying that today he'll knock him out before the bell even rings. The shock of the attack causes a lot of surprise among viewers, but it's clear it doesn't cause any damage to the American. With mockery, James asks if the Arab could feel the size of America. But even without landing the blow, Amir doesn't get discouraged and just steps back a little. Because if James's size is the only thing he has, Amir transforms completely, saying he won't hold back anymore. Both paws and a tail are formed, and with his full form, the adventurer declares that he's coming in with everything. But the American remains unfazed. Instead, he raises his arms and calls for support from the citizens. And with the power of the United States, a patriotic outfit begins forming around him until James strikes a masculine pose in his gear, which makes Amir very excited. Without wasting time, James leaps with all his strength, practically vanishing from the arena until reaching Amir's flank. But already behind him, he calmly assures him that he's willing to have an exciting battle between the two for the audience. So faced with everything, Lucas panics, but better late than never, he yells to officially begin the exhibition match. Still behind the opponent, James says they're going to make the most of it, and then lands a powerful blow that Amir unexpectedly manages to block. This time, the Arab is the one who boasts, asking if the American can feel the power of the Middle East. Either way, James says what matters is intensity, so Amir asks if the adventurer can keep his cool after the next attack. Like a true dragon, the previous year's winner unleashes a breath of fire. James comments that he doesn't really mind dreamer-type men, but in response, he launches a barrage of punches that disperse the flames. which sends him flying back the moment he gets close, carried away by the wind. James has the profession of hero, which gets stronger depending on the number of supporters. So to block the flames with just the air pressure of a punch, that's truly absurd. Lucas, for his part, continues narrating with excitement because this time it's a fight between the strongest in the tournament and the strongest in the world. Commenting on his opponent's profession, Amir says he seems very confident in his own power. Then James replies that since the United States is the most powerful nation in the world, it's only natural for the person who carries the will of its people to be the same. In that case, Amir states that he'll fight the American on his own terms because he needs to defeat him at his peak. What the Arab suggests is that they settle this with a simple strength contest, and obviously James doesn't refuse to take part. Before the battle resumes, their fighting spirit seems to overflow. Amir says he's now going to show his final technique, one worthy of someone as great as his opponent. So quickly, wings grow from the dragon's back, making him take flight above the arena. From up there, Amir asks if the American has the courage to take the attack head-on. Still as confident as ever, James simply tells him to bring it on. With that, the Arab gets even more excited to fight and charges down, engulfed in his own flames. In just a few seconds, he strikes the American's guard, which holds off the charge with full strength. But even so, a shockwave of energy bursts out, sending the announcer flying. A huge cloud of dust, along with small stones, also hits the spectators in the stands. Most importantly, after that charge, James admitted the incredible power of Amir. However, the fact was that the American had completely blocked something that, at first, shouldn't have been possible for a human being. More proud than ever, James advances, thanking him for the fun, and lands a punch right in the dragon's face. This time it sends him flying until he hits the arena wall, dangerously close to Lucas. And since Amir is thrown outside the ring limits, the winner of the competition is officially crowned, James Blood. Back in his normal form, the Arab understands the reason why the American is so powerful, because the more he fights, the stronger he becomes. Also, in a very heroic gesture, he offers to assist the announcer if needed. Either way, the event must now move on to the main part, and since James's son, named Noah, will participate, everyone should stay tuned. In a house a bit farther away, a boy laughs a lot, saying his relative is making him feel embarrassed. That's the boy named Noah, and before fighting, a little girl wishes him good luck, which the boy appreciates. Noah also says he's going to fight in a way that honors the title of being a hero's son. Meanwhile, where our hero is with his badge on his chest, he announces that he's heading out now. Stufika tells Yudo to do his best, and Arisa says she'll cook a delicious meal when he returns. Serena simply wishes him good luck with a hand gesture, which our hero returns. Shortly afterward, in the southern region of Atlantis, Yudo is materialized on top of a mountain. Right above him flies a massive bird, and next to him stands a giant lizard. This is Atlantis, and for something like this to appear out of nowhere, the hero comments that dungeons are truly incredible. Either way, as he closes his eyes, he senses that there are 50 people. And even though they've been discreet since earlier, Yudo tells these hidden individuals that they don't look like referees. So with their positions exposed, 5 assassins emerge from hiding to try and eliminate our hero. Back in the center of the arena, James asks the host if the event should start now. Then Lucas announces that the great mission with over 1,000 participants, named the Conquest of Atlantis, officially begins now. Back to our hero's perspective, one of the assassins comments that they must have ended up there by coincidence. But since the guy isn't even trying to hide his hostility, Yudo just laughs. Either way, the hooded man says there's no need to be so cautious. After all, the competition has just begun, and he wastes no time attacking. Unfortunately for the assassin, Yudo reacts instantly, and all he manages to find is the protagonist's fist landing squarely on his face. The assassin is slammed into the ground and defeated instantly, which earns the hero 1 badge. Terrified by what they just saw, the rest of the line starts casting spells. So several long-range attacks fly toward our hero, and one of the assassins believes the boy won't be able to dodge this magical barrage. But he was completely wrong, because Yuto not only dodged it, but also used his evasions to close the distance to the mages, and with a punch to the ground, sent them all flying. As easily as it looked, the hero claimed 3 more badges. Then he mocked the last remaining adventurer by asking where exactly that barrier was supposed to be. In the same place as the 2 of them, the event's camera was positioned, so the brilliant move the protagonist made was broadcast to everyone, including even the champion of the previous edition, who was surprised by the rumored magicless sage. James, in turn, comments that the boy is also the one who stopped the dungeon collapse, so Amir finds him very interesting. Back on the battlefield, the protagonist asks if the assassins are being sent by the same employer, because he's been attacked frequently lately. And since that's exactly the case, the warrior is left speechless. Some time ago, the group received a request from the Kuju group, and according to their analysis, even though he was labeled as a sage, the hero specialized in close quarters combat. Moreover, since his combat abilities were supposed to be at most B class, the assassins felt quite at ease. Therefore, the CEO shouted that this wasn't a game. But in any case, the fact was that whoever killed Yudo would receive a generous reward. So obviously, this wasn't a risk-free deal. Since the money was enough for all 5 of them to retire, an excuse for failure wouldn't be acceptable. That's why, behind the scenes, it was arranged that they would be teleported to the same location, and the results had to come quickly. Back in the present, the assassin stammers, complaining that they hadn't been informed about any of this. He also yells, saying that the protagonist's rank was supposed to be only B class. Then Yudo explains that he didn't lie on the promotion exam and that he's always fought at his best. Therefore, the only explanation left is that his opponent unfortunately misjudged the true potential of his power. From a distance, another adventurer watches all the destruction caused by the protagonist's attack. Holding a badge in his hand, he comments that things on the southern front seem to be getting interesting. Then he holds up the coin and asks if his companion doesn't think so too. What's strange, however, is that this companion turns out to be a giant monstrous feline. After having his badge stolen, an adventurer begs to be released from the animal's jaws. But since its owner doesn't respond, the monster simply does what comes naturally. And so the bespectacled man gets ready to continue the hunt for the next adventurer. This is the mage representing the United Kingdom, Max Henry, and besides the tiger from earlier, he has several other monsters under his control. Switching scenes to a commercial building in Indonesia, a man in a suit asks, very concerned, if it was really okay to let that person participate. After all, that girl was responsible for causing a dungeon break in the country, which led her to become the internationally wanted adventurer known as Asahina Kyuka. In different regions of the competition, Canada defeats an enemy and Noah doesn't fall behind either. Meanwhile, the protagonist moves swiftly through the tall grass until he passes by an archer hidden in a bush. As he prepares his arrow, the young man finds it amusing how easy it is to sneak around the southern zone, especially because there's no other way toward the center without going through there. Given that, he fires the arrow aiming to secure another badge. However, just as it's about to hit the hero from behind, he notices at the last second and grabs it, leaving the archer completely stunned. Yudo then simply uses the rotation of his body to hurl the projectile back with even more force, hitting the enemy, and easily defeating him along with his previous victims. Once again, all of the protagonist's achievements are being broadcast, so his teammates are thrilled by his performance. Looking at the rankings, incredibly, the hero takes the lead over his main competitor, Noah. Speaking of the boy, he's from the Blood Orphanage and is the adoptive son of James, so Lucas asks if that position was expected. In response, the American says that he's been watching Kirishima for a while now, so he's not surprised. So Lucas asks if that means Yudo has a chance to win. But about that, James says he's not sure, though he adds that a true hero never betrays expectations. In this case, the only thing left to find out is which of them will endure that expectation to become the true hero. Without further delay, the host announces the second phase of the competition. That's because the skills required of an exceptional adventurer aren't limited to combat, but also the ability to protect people from dungeons. With the signal just given, challenging areas have appeared and furious monsters will attack the competitors. However, Lucas states this is an opportunity because adventurers who conquer these areas will earn rewards, and the rewards will scale according to the difficulty level of the area cleared. In this case, conquering high difficulty zones could give someone an edge and perhaps turn the entire match around. So the host asks viewers not to miss the drama of the second half of the tournament. Suddenly, the protagonist receives a message on his communicator. This is the instruction regarding the challenge zone where adventurers who defeat monsters will earn badges. At this moment, the hero practically already has the necessary badges for the gates, but he believes that this second round will change things. That said, he wants to clear at least one area to secure his position, and the closest one can be seen just ahead. In the Southwest Challenge area, a girl is fighting against a monster that appears to be a Cerberus named Orthros. However, she's not in the best condition to fight such a high-level monster. One of Orthros' heads quickly attacks, the girl dodges and prepares a counterattack with her fan. Using spins in the air to increase rotational force, she strikes the monster's head. But Orthros counters with a brutal hit that sends the pink-haired girl flying and rolling across the ground. With that, the girl is no longer able to fight, but she still tries to force herself because she can't afford to lose. The fact is, she went through a lot to get there, and now calling herself the heroine of everyone. Chain stands up despite her injuries and asks the viewers to remember her name. From behind a tree, a suspicious hooded man mocks the girl's profession. And it gets even worse because he was ready to steal the reward. In the end, Yudo was also on his way, so a clash between the three was definitely bound to happen. On a day like any other, a massive tower mysteriously rose. This happened 3 years ago when the tower suddenly appeared and brought chaos. That pink-haired girl felt powerless at the time due to the low number of adventurers in her country. Naturally, the military stepped in, but even when they hit the enemies, their bullets did nothing. So the fate of those on the front line was obvious. Among the military, others helped with evacuation, and while the population panicked, in the middle of all that chaos, the girl was there too. Shortly after, the citizens finally saw a way to escape by sea. But since everyone was panicking, there would definitely be collateral damage. Kin's friend, on the other hand, didn't think twice before yelling at her to come with her. But what the girl was thinking now was, where could they even run on such a small island? Her friend was certain that no one there could fight the monsters, yet Teen was still deep in thought. At a certain moment, while parents ran with a little girl, she dropped her toy. And because it was an important doll, the girl ran back to get it, leaving both her parents and Teen desperate. Especially because just ahead was a massive monster that, even before the girl reached it, stomped and destroyed the doll. So in front of that, holding an identical doll in her hands, Teen couldn't hold it anymore, and simply started running to resolve it in her own way. Since she was very little, there was a cool and very cute heroine from a popular anime. And the most important thing was that Teen looked up to her and wanted to be just like her. Because of that, this time the girl ran to the child without hesitation, and gave her the doll, saying it was a present, which made the little one happy, just as Teen had hoped. In any case, because of that decision, the girl put herself in front of the monster, and she leaped forward to go all the way, because if she really could be like the heroine she always admired, surely she could do the same. Back to the present, the girl jumps onto the monster with an attack that radiates colorful energy, and this time, Orthra has become slightly disoriented from the blow. 3 years have passed and she awakened to her profession, but her homeland, Vietnam, is still on the defensive as neighboring countries refuse to help. However, if she wins here, at least she can overcome the hardships and have her voice heard around the world. In that case, maybe among the adventurers across the globe, someone will be willing to lend their strength. Back in the fight, the monster charges at full speed, and although she feels pathetic for relying on others, the girl declares she'll manage it. So she jumps once again, and using another one of her previous spins, attacks the monster with even more determination, which luckily works this time. Unexpectedly, a system reward pops up, granting 100 badges for defeating Orthros. With that, her goal of passing the qualifiers should have been accomplished. If not for the sudden appearance of someone else who attacked her from behind, slamming her into the ground with the impact of a punch. With a malicious smile, the man says he had been waiting for her. Stein, whose profession is boxer, had been waiting for the moment when the girl would defeat the monster. Initially, he was ranked 4th, but now he has defeated Tien, who was leading the scoreboard and humiliated her by stepping on her. On top of that, Tien has no shame in admitting he was lucky to face a cute girl. Still lying on the ground, Tien asks if he had been watching her all this time. The boy replies that patience is an essential virtue for an adventurer, but the girl claims that it's just cowardice. In that case, the boxer feels slightly offended and kicks the adventurer, saying there are no rules in a fight. To him, trampling others is necessary to stand out, and anything should be used to survive, because that's what adventurers do. Tien, in turn, says she never admired people like that, but Cheyenne only mocks her. After all, that kind of attitude is something only children should have. Before he can leave, something hits the boy's head, annoying him greatly. It was a magic projectile that Tien launched using her last remaining strength to try and retrieve the badges. In this case, Cyan returns rather irritated, since he had tried to be nice to the girl. But since she decided to attack him, he clenches his fist and says he'll send her straight to a coffin. Revealing himself as someone who enjoys hurting women, he claims he'll start by destroying her pretty face. That really would have happened, since an explosion follows his punch. But fortunately, at the last second, a certain someone stops the attack with their bare hands. And since there are supposedly no rules in a fight, our hero asks if he's allowed to interfere too. Obviously, the boxer asks who the hell the boy is, but our hero answers with a strike straight to the center of the aggressor's chest. It sends him flying into a tree, hitting so hard the trunk can't even withstand the impact. Faced with this, the boy lies on the ground coughing, not understanding what just happened. He yells, asking what the protagonist did to cause that kind of result. Theoretically, his diamond gloves should crush even iron. So the hero suggests maybe it's due to the user's lack of skill, which makes Cyan furious. Once again, the cameras are focused on the protagonist, and with this new feat, Amir spills his drink in shock at what he's seeing. To explain, James comments that this former boxer caused a lot of problems until his license was revoked. Although he's unreliable, his combatability is high level, and the power of his punches, enhanced by his skills, is comparable to missiles. Faced with this, Lucas asks if Kirishima managed to stop that with ease. But the fact is that the boy didn't stop it, he redirected it. He received the punch with his left hand and then released the force through his right hand, channeling it through his relaxed body. Amir has heard that such techniques exist in ancient Eastern martial arts, so he's curious if it's something a sage can do. Facing the hero, Kyan asks if helping adventurers from other countries isn't being too soft. But the hero replies that he hates people who steal the fruits of others' hard work. Cyan in turn says he simply chose the safest and most reliable path, and although he initially wanted to avoid trouble, he pulls a cube from his pocket, saying they should settle things in the ring. When he throws it on the ground, an illusory place called Battle Box is instantly summoned. This is a death arena where neither party can leave until one of them can't continue anymore. With that, Cyan takes off his shirt, saying that the strongest in close combat is ready. So our hero responds by removing his jacket too and repeating the same confident words. This makes the boxer a little concerned, seeing that the boy's body is like that of a seasoned veteran. Without further delay, standing face to face, the sound of the gong is heard. Cyan charges and aiming to win in a single round. but unexpectedly, his jab is blocked, and even trying something low doesn't change the outcome. So our hero wears a confident expression, which drives the boxer mad. Wasting no time, Cyan goes all in, trying to land a blow. But it's Yudo who is actually applying pressure, and once again, by grabbing one of the boxer's punches, he redirects the impact right back at him. Cyan becomes desperate to know who this guy is, and even more, how he's still unknown. But regardless, our hero tells him to brace himself and hits him in the stomach for the crime of assaulting a woman, which not only makes the boy lose consciousness, but also sends him crashing hard into the ropes of his own ring before falling flat on his back. With Cyan unconscious, the ring is undone, and our hero retrieves the stolen badges, along with the boxer's own. With that, the protagonist reaches his 10th badge. And during all that time, the girl says nothing, not wanting to confront him. But it wasn't like she needed to, since Yudo returned it of his own free will. With a smile on his face, the hero praises how cool it was that she didn't give up, even in the worst conditions. Still unable to look Yudo in the eyes, Tien thanks him for everything. But she forces herself to do it, thinking she might be able to ask this person for help. Yudo, on the other hand, isn't paying attention because he finds a badge on the ground and assumes she dropped it during the fight. He gently places it back on the girl's shirt, asking her to make sure not to lose it again. And without giving her a chance to speak, the hero simply says they'll see each other at the main event. Then he leaves, leaving behind Tien, who's left feeling pretty embarrassed. Switching scenes, Noah is working alongside Kaneda amid utter chaos. That's because the two of them are facing the internationally wanted criminal known as Kyoka Asahina. And honestly, Kaneda feels a bit bad for being Japanese. After all, sharing a nationality with a criminal like her is a source of shame for the boy. Just a few minutes earlier, the blonde was fighting with James' adopted son, and the battle was heating up. Noah was surprised by Kaneda's skills, since he'd heard that Yudo was the only one to worry about in Japan. The blonde replied that he understood the warning, but said they should have researched more. As the son of a hero, Kaneda recognizes that Noah is also quite amazing, and he also thought the protagonist might be jealous that he got to face someone so strong while he was out hunting badges. Either way, since Noah had 11 badges, this was a good chance to score a bunch at once. Before anything else, James' adopted son asks if the blonde wants to run, but Kaneda responds that he's going to teach him a lesson. That's his motto. In the Kamijo family, there's no such thing as running from a fight. Instead of getting annoyed, Noah thinks that's awesome. With nothing left to say, the blonde announces his new skill, learned specifically for this day. It's called Sacred Knight's Resolve, which boosts physical abilities based on the amount of damage received in the past. In response, Noah says it's quite similar to his own. He has a skill called Heroic Qualities, which increases physical abilities based on damage dealt in the past. However, the opponent's confident tone annoys the blonde, mostly because it sounds a lot like his own. But about that, Noah charges in saying they'll settle it now, and naturally, their attacks are just about to clash. Until suddenly, a heavy sensation steals both their attention. Out of nowhere, a girl appears between them, blocking the boys' attacks, causing them to retreat and reassess the situation. The girl starts laughing, mocking the candidate from Japan, because to her, this level of power is laughable. Now that he can observe her better, Kaneda realizes this is Asahina Kyoka. After blocking the attacks of two of the top candidates with ease, Lucas introduces her as the representative from Indonesia. But even he only now realizes that this person is Asahina, and the same goes for the spectators on the panel. At this moment, she should be someone internationally wanted, but upon checking the system, everything becomes clear. The truth is that the girl threatened the Indonesian government to be forcibly registered as a competitor, and since the final decision rests on this island, no human authority can intervene. James, for his part, laughs a lot, not caring about the past of someone who wants to compete. But laughing off the situation isn't how Amir wants to handle this inconvenience, especially since that person was responsible for a dungeon collapse in his country. Naturally, the Arab wants to eliminate her right then and there, but James wisely stops his companion, to his surprise. In a very mature tone, the American states that they're in the middle of a tournament, and they don't have the right to interfere. Besides, James genuinely wants to watch the fierce battles of the new generation of kids. So even though he's really pissed off, Emir understands and joins him to watch. Meanwhile, at the protagonist's house, Suzuka falls out of her chair when she sees who that person is. After all, the international criminal they're talking about is his sister. Back in the battle, Kaneda shouts that it's not the time to be fighting, and Noah understands completely. Then Asahina mocks the situation, saying it's typical of the United States to pretend to be friends with Japan, even though they don't even know what's going on behind the scenes. Before the fight begins, Kaneda shouts for Noah to pay attention, because they'll be dealing with a dual-class adventurer who is both a swordswoman and a mage. However, unexpectedly, the girl opens a rift in space-time and disappears into it. Instead of vanishing instantly, Asahina reappears behind Noah, almost cutting him down. But at the last second, Kaneda pushes the American away, making them both fall to the ground. Noah tries to apologize, but the blonde insists it's not the time for that. At that moment, Kaneda thinks he's never missed Yudo so much, because not even the son of a hero is enough right now. Without wasting time, the girl combines a physical strike with a blast of energy, and a massive burst of fire hits both boys. Next, the criminal uses the environment to her advantage by creating a wall of fire to prevent any escape. and she slowly walks toward the warriors, asking them not to bore her. After all, she's here to have plenty of fun. At first, the girl stores her sword back into the spatial rift, and while casting magic, tells the boys to fight with some enthusiasm. Leading the defense, Canada speaks with Noah to make sure they cover each other's blind spots. Quickly, the blonde charges in, saying he'll open the path. At that moment, all Canada can think about is the training he had with Yuto. So while the girl fires off dark energy blasts, he remembers how his master's strikes are still ingrained in his sword. Because of that, Canada doesn't fear advancing against her attacks. After all, now is the time to show the fighting style he created, so those training days won't have been in vain. He then draws another sword from its sheath and envelops both in electric magic, demonstrating his power. Asahina, in turn, finds it very interesting to see a holy knight dual-wielding swords, but she responds with even more attacks, wanting to see how far the boy's abilities will go. Surprisingly, even while concerned about the situation, the blonde keeps defending himself. This gives Noah a chance to advance from behind without worrying about being hit by magic blasts. And within seconds, the moment finally comes for the blonde to open space for the hero's son, who prepares a powerful punch, making it seem like it's all over. But Asahina remains bored, thinking the strategy is terrible. To prove her point, she sticks her arms into spatial rifts and unexpectedly applies a distant rear naked choke, disabling the boy from advancing. Canada uses this disruption as an opportunity to attack the criminal from behind. But once again, she doesn't worry since she can cast magic even without her arms. Even so, Canada is fired up with a plan in mind. He quickly drops his sword and charges in with his fists, and despite never having tried it before, he replicates his master's 1-inch punch. Blood spills, making him initially think he had landed a hit. However, the reality is Asahina laughing at the blonde since she redirected the attack using a rift in her chest to strike Noah instead. Canada runs to apologize for the accident, but Noah tells him not to worry since it was a good hit. In any case, it becomes clear to both of them that the girl is a difficult opponent. Hovering above the battlefield, Asahina asks if the two really think that place is safe. Then Canada senses something approaching and quickly pushes Noah out of the way, but the girl wasn't going to let that happen. She instantly activates a skill called Golden Silence, which is capable of freezing the abilities of weaker opponents. With that, Canada collapses to the ground instantly, leaving Noah very worried. Without further delay, Asahina brings her sword back into reality through the temporal rift once again, and she fires an energy wave at the blonde using her skill Sonic Blade. Cackling with excitement, Asahina is dying to know whether the boy will abandon his partner or die protecting each other. Either option is fine for her, as long as she's entertained. Canada really isn't in good shape, and soon a devastating explosion occurs. But when he opens his eyes, the blonde realizes he's still alive. That's because Noah stepped in front of him to protect him, since now he considers him a partner. Asahina is clearly annoyed by that, so she places her arms into the spatial rift once more, and begins taking down several adventurers, also managing to steal their devices. Canada can't believe the girl managed to steal so many devices in just 1 second, and Noah feels the same, completely shocked by the difference in level between them. With another portal open, Asahina assures them that the next time they meet, they'll have even more fun. But she also acknowledges that this will only happen if they manage to catch up with her, and then she simply vanishes. With the injuries he has now, Noah believes he won't be able to keep going. However, Canada quickly offers to bandage the boy's arm. Noah shouts that since the blonde can still fight, he should just take his badge and run. But Canada yells even louder that he needs to return the favor. This fight will have to wait until the main event happens. Therefore, until the final moment, the blonde asks for them to move forward together. So with only a tiny bit of time remaining, Canada walks toward the goal while holding Noah. Back at the center of the arena, Lucas announces that many adventurers are already reaching the objective. So naturally, it's time to introduce the audience to the adventurers already confirmed for the final. With a total of 157 badges, the criminal Kyuka Asahina is currently in the lead. Next, Max Henry surprisingly reached a total of 149 badges. After him is the hero's son, James, who got injured during the last fight. But thanks to the Holy Knight who supported him, the two have a combined 148 badges. Finally, the last to be introduced is Tin, who ended with 112 badges due to a reward. That said, there are only 3 remaining spots still waiting to be filled. Canada believes at least one person should drop out of the tournament, which Noah agrees with. However, instead of hoping for fewer competitors, Tien was wishing that person would show up in time. And as a result of her prayers, the Japanese survivor of the dungeon collapse in Japan, Yuto Kirishima, appeared. And regarding his achievement count with an incredible 248 devices, our hero appeared leading the competition. Finally, the rankings end and the final tournament begins. But before that, the host asks everyone to take a look at the special system for enjoying the main event. As everything is broadcast on the massive digital screen above the arena, this program is presented on the LED. This is a unique technology from Atlantis that measures and analyzes battles, assigning scores to adventurers' combat abilities. That said, first Lucas announces they will check a mirror and makes it clear that average good numbers are around 1,000 points. When analyzed, the Arab's total power is over 7,000, which was already expected from someone so strong. Now regarding the strongest adventurer, James Blood, he has an impressive rating of 9,300 points. In this case, Amir starts doubting the system's accuracy for being nearly 2,000 points behind. Either way, Lucas now tells the audience they'll check the scores of the event participants. Canada, the first to be evaluated, has a total of 4,500 points. Tian, on the other hand, is rated slightly lower with 3,800. Next, Noah's evaluation reveals 4,500 power points. Max Henry is revealed as an adventurer with a total power of 4,300. Zuru, a previously unshown participant, has 4,900 points. And Reed Hellickson, who is in the same category, has exactly the same amount. However, sitting at the very top is Asahina, with an astounding 10,000 points, which leaves Noah very surprised. Something like that is unbelievable to the adventurers, as it even exceeds James' stats. So the girl enjoys the moment with everyone stunned by her strength. Canada sensed it directly during their battle, but didn't know the gap was that huge. If things continued like this, her victory could be possible, and although no one knows what her goal is, the world would essentially be under her control, which would obviously put everyone in the face of a massive crisis. Anyway, it's time for the final participant to be tested, our protagonist. And unexpectedly, the technology encounters an error when trying to scan his total power. At first, Lucas gets worried, thinking it might be a system malfunction. But our hero believes it's the work of the successor, who's hiding his power. Incredibly, the spectators interpret it as a sign that Yudo's power is so massive that it can't even be measured. In this case, Yudo feels relieved, though Canada doesn't understand what's happening. And from James to Asahina, they all get excited. Max, on his part, can't believe the results, especially since just the boy's physical strength alone already gives him 4,800 points. Therefore, the Brit firmly believes this is the person everyone should watch out for in the tournament. With a shout, Lucas announces that the true power of the hero will be revealed when the match begins. Therefore, the tournament bracket that everyone has been curious about is now revealed. And since our hero will face the winner of the first battle, he looks at Canada, because if the blonde wins, they'll meet in the semifinals. In this case, the two get serious about it, and until then, no matter what happens, they both assure themselves they won't lose. Without further delay, the first part of the tournament will take place between Asahina and Noah, who are favorites to win. Obviously, the boy is nervous about stepping into the ring with the girl, but that's when Canada comforts him, telling Noah to do his best. And even though he's still not very confident, he promises to make the fight count. As the two position themselves in the arena, the other participants rise on the floating chairs, until they soon disappear, leaving only the challengers at the center of the conflict. Facing the boy, Asahina asks if his hands are still useful. That Noah throws away his bandage, saying there's no need to worry since both his friends and the medical team helped a lot. Without further delay, the match to decide the winner of the first battle of the final tournament is about to begin. And to avenge the humiliation he suffered from the criminal not long ago, Noah charges forward the moment the gong sounds. Unfortunately, his first strike only hits the ground because the girl dodges easily. Even so, Noah tries to land a kick from behind, but it does nothing. Faced with this, the hero's son tries to launch an even stronger attack, but his fist goes through a portal. And when that happens, the girl asks if Noah knows what will happen to his arm if she closes the rift now. However, realizing the situation, the warrior uses his willpower to dispel the portal, which excites Asahina because apparently he's going to show more than last time. In response, the boy asks if the girl forgot about his profession as a hero. By showing his strength, he empowers himself, and with this crowd watching, it makes him better than ever before. Even so, just as one of his strikes gets close, the girl defends herself with a large-scale spell, which not only hits the boy, but also sends debris flying toward the stands, even making a child seek safety in their father's arms. Faced with this, Asahina asks if the so-called hero isn't going to help the public. But since this is a 3D hologram, the boy says that real bodies won't be harmed, which causes James to react with a bit of disappointment and Asahina with deep boredom. This time, the girl is the one who advances, pulling her sword from the time rift, but the boy blocks it at the last second. Still, little by little, the warrior's strength starts to weaken more and more, and the criminal's finishing strike drags Noah, shattering the arena floor. For someone who brags about being a hero, Asahina says he's nothing. And without wanting to explain, she simply raises her weapon, saying he doesn't need to understand everything. But she also makes it clear that she doesn't need a fake while summoning dozens of black energy orbs. Noah, on the other hand, still has to figure out what she means by not needing to understand. But already fed up with it all, Asahina bids the boy farewell by launching all those attacks at once. And when his health bar reaches 0, Noah burns with pain until he falls face first to the ground, making Asahina the big winner. At that moment, silence falls over the arena, and even Canada remains stunned. Yuto, on the other hand, suddenly jumps from his seat after realizing the criminal is planning to do something more. When she raises her sword, Lucas shouts for someone from the protection team to stop her. But when the slash came down, no one was there in time. No one except a certain someone who managed to arrive at the last moment to defend James' son. That was our hero, and Asahina said it was a pleasure to meet him. Already injured for not being able to stop the attack perfectly, Yudo declares that the match is over. And that attitude leaves Noah confused since the boy represents another country. Without caring about that, Yudo shouts again that there's no reason to continue. In response, the criminal attacks, saying that a spoiled child needs to be taught a lesson. Thus, once again, the swords slash it's the protagonist and Noah screams desperately for the boy to stop since his profession isn't that of a hero. So there's no meaning in showing that kind of resolve to the public. Even so, our hero remains determined and with all his strength, sends the criminal flying back. That's because to him, profession doesn't matter since a true hero doesn't need a reason to help someone else. Hearing that deeply moved Noah because all this time he had thought of heroism as just his class. Asahina, on her end, explains that she was kind of bored but wouldn't mind cutting down the boy instead of his friend. So the protagonist declines that invitation, since the two of them are already set to face off in the final. And since Asahina is someone who always saves the best for last, she agrees to wait a little longer. Thus, once again, the winner of the first match is crowned, and fortunately, Noah is taken to the medical station alive. But before leaving, Noah calls the protagonist with his last bit of strength and thanks him from the bottom of his heart. Back at the presentation, in a stroke of bad luck, Yudo is chosen to participate in the next match. Concerned about his friend's condition, Canada shouts for the hero to go get treatment right away. However, Yudo sees no need for that and exchanges a smile with a blonde, saying he'll use his motto to his advantage. Back in the seats reserved for the next participants, Max receives a messenger animal that says Yudo should open a certain door. And in that case, he wonders what's on the other side, suggesting maybe there's a princess in distress. Noticing the Brit talking to an animal, Canada gets curious about what he's doing. And back in the arena, as the ring is being set up, the host raises the question for viewers. Will Yudo actually be able to fight? Zuru, who is kneeling, comments that although the battles are ruthless, he won't dishonorably focus on the injury. The hero appreciates the kindness but asks him to fight seriously. Although the protagonist stopped the bleeding using magic, his right arm is now useless. And without further delay, just as the host declares the start of the second match, Zu charges forward at high speed. Contrary to what he said earlier, the warrior's attack is quite cowardly. Teen yells that it's unfair, and Canada sarcastically points out how obvious that is. Back to our hero's perspective, he dodges several kunai being hurled at him. Then he questions what made Zu change so drastically. Yudo shouts, reminding him that he told him to come at him seriously, and slams the ground mid-sentence, sending rocks flying across the arena. And very cleverly, they act as a shield against the opponent's kunai. Using this opportunity to his advantage, Zu appears from the flanks. With a devious smile, he explains that his profession is assassin, which allows him to summon infinite hidden weapons. Yudo, in turn, replies that he talks too much and might not be suited to be an assassin. Zu's massive shuriken clashes with the protagonist's fists, cracking the weapon and forcing the warrior to retreat. Faced with that, Zu admits the protagonist is strong, even while injured. Therefore, Yudo says he's honored because he's truly happy to be fighting the world's greatest adventurers. But despite praising that spirit, Zu says playtime is over. Suddenly, right in front of the hero, a window appears showing a very troubling video. That's because, in the exact location where he left for the tournament, that S-rank Lancer was standing with his companions. As the protagonist suddenly stops moving, the host questions why. And finally, as he reveals the reason he's there, he was hired to kill Yudo. After shaking the boy, a strike lands, and since the lives of his friends and family are in their hands, Zu believes the hero understands the meaning behind it. Even so, the hero's allies don't understand what Yudo is doing, and others don't even care. In the end, Yudo finally realizes that the Kujo group is truly the one behind all this. If it were just about him, he wouldn't care. The situation is different when it's the people he loves. On top of that, while he's distracted, the warrior takes the chance to rush behind him for a finishing blow. However, even now, something Yudo sees on the digital screen restores his confidence. So just before the attack can land, the hero suddenly turns toward the assassin and lands a powerful punch to his stomach. One that not only makes him cough up blood, but slams Zuru's body into the ground, dropping his health bar to 0. In this way, the victorious fighter is officially Yudo Kirishima. With the weight of defeat on his shoulders, Zu questions the hero's decision, since there are still hostages. However, the fact is that the protagonist trusts his sister and his friends, and more than that, he can clearly see the reliable allies he has. Among them is Kabuji himself, who once pretended to be a villain. Going to the place where Kujo is, the leader of the Abyss Guild confronts him head-on. Finding the situation very strange, the blonde asks if the guy wasn't supposed to be Kujo's lapdog. But those words coming from a man who was supposed to be an agent for both America and China don't mean much. Either way, the Lancer gets ready to attack, saying he has no time for this. And since he'll be dealing with an A-rank mage, he smiles and says the Abyss Guild boys should hurry up and die already. But to Kaoji Tsukishiro, this intimidation sounds exactly like a bad omen for defeat. In front of Tsukishiro, the Lancer asks which side he's on, USA or Europe. but the truth is that he's Japanese and that's why he fights for Japan. In that case, Kujo comments that finding someone who lies more than him is making him regret things. Still, putting that aside for now, the Lancer says the boy will have to die and charges at him. In response, Kuji summons a kind of virtual keyboard, creating a barrier in front of him. And unexpectedly, a rope-like construct appears, grabbing the blonde and throwing him out of the building. However, as an S-rank adventurer, Kujo spins in the air until he manages to soften his fall with ease. Still, Kuji follows him to the street, saying the room is too cramped for the two of them. In any case, the blonde believes that the rumors about the Japanese guy being a mage are lies, since someone that smart wouldn't have such a common profession. And in fact, that's true, as the Japanese man's real job is programmer, capable of rewriting possibilities. As he creates new events with his ability, people may call him a mage. In this case, using a spear illusion, Kujo claims he can do those tricks too. But confident in himself, Kuji says the adventurer will find out for himself if it's just a trick, which the blonde believes is nothing more than a pathetic bluff. Still, at the moment the illusions meet, one is blocked by a knight class copy, and the other two are completely restrained by immobilization magic, giving space for the knight to finish them all at once, leaving the blonde extremely frustrated. What was most bizarre to him was that the Japanese guy was supposed to be just A rank. Therefore, forcing himself to win the fight, he charges forward again, defeating all the clones and stopping right in front of his opponent. Trying to end the battle, the Lancer jumps high and from the top of a pole infuses magic into his weapon. Then, with a look full of hatred, he tells the Japanese guy to head to the afterlife and throws the spear with all his strength, which leads Kauji to react by closing his eyes for some reason. Sometime in the past, Kaneda couldn't believe that Kujo Kimitaka had killed his own wife, and worse than that was the fact that Kujo served the man who did that to his mother. But to Kauji, that was expected from a demon of vengeance, as even his father knew about it. Either way, by making the protagonist participate in the Atlantis tournament, the Japanese man made it clear he could begin his counterattack too. And that was exactly what he now intended to start doing. With a bow in hand, Kuji comments that he hopes to have a good relationship with the blonde and fires a powerful arrow that collides with the spear. Unexpectedly, the arrow deflects the weapon far away, continuing its path until it hits Kujo directly, bringing unbearable pain. Until a few seconds later, the blonde falls to the ground defeated. With the victory, Kuji announces that he implanted a non-violence program into the blonde, so for a while he won't be able to hurt anyone. Back on our hero's balcony, the three girls are impressed that such a strong adventurer was defeated so easily. In the end, Suzuka understands that this is the true power of Tsukishiro Kauji. Even on the ground, Kujo tries to summon his weapon again, which doesn't work. So he gives up, starting to throw a tantrum, saying that both he and the hero are lying adventurers. And he doesn't hold back from complaining about how bad the reputation of S-ranks is getting. Either way, even there, a message appears declaring Teen as the winner. Back in the arena, the girl jumps on top of Yudo to celebrate, surprising his sister and Serena, but infuriating Suzuka. For the next fight, Max will face the Holy Knight Kaneda. But suddenly, a book in his shirt pocket begins to glow, and the boy laughs, asking to wait a little longer. Given his next opponent, he believes something very interesting is about to happen. Finally, the final battle of the first phase of the main tournament will take place between Kaneda and Max. And the crowd's cheers don't stop for this match, as both are very popular among the ladies. Before anything else, Max says it's an honor to fight such a fun opponent. And since he doesn't understand what the Brit means, Kaneda simply warns that he'll go all out, which Max doesn't mind at all. So he pulls out the book he was talking to earlier from inside his jacket and opens it, revealing it to be a sort of grimoire filled with monsters. With the pages open, the boy summons a giant octopus just as the announcer declares the start of the match. Max asks the Holy Knight to make things fun for him, which despite the terrifying beast in front of him gets Kaneda quite fired up. The monster quickly prepares an attack, but the blonde dodges. His opponent's profession is that of a mage, and while it's a common class, his specialty lies in the grimoire that controls spiritual beasts. Therefore, if the boy manages to destroy that book, he could end the battle quickly. When it's time to strike, his attack is blocked, to Kaneda's surprise, as he didn't expect such a fast reaction. And with the boy's sword stuck, he gets hit by a tentacle from the beast that nearly throws him out of the arena. With pride, the Brit comments that an octopus is made up of 100% muscle and is stronger than it seems, saying the fun will start now. Suddenly, the beast begins transforming to Asahina, leaving the blonde totally confused. And even Lucas is lost, shouting to the audience that this is completely unexpected. This even prompts the real criminal herself to call out Max for pulling weird tricks. Regardless, the Brit says the blonde is quite an interesting person. He asks if the boy is already familiar with the octopus imitation skills, and explains that this ritual causes a monster take the form of the opponent's greatest fear. Then he asks if Asahina is a trauma for Kaneda, startling him, but he quickly responds by charging straight toward his fear. Their attacks collide instantly, and the blonde is shocked to realize that the copy's power rivals the real one. Even so, Kaneda thinks that this Asahina shouldn't be capable of using her actual skills. But when he attacks, the idea proves wrong, because she splits through a portal. and to everyone's surprise, she suddenly begins replicating all of the criminal's abilities. From atop the floating seats, the strongest adventurers carefully analyze everything. Upon realizing that Max was hiding this ability, James starts to piece something together. Then, noticing the American nearby, Amir comments that many in his continent revere the boy as the true adventurer. That's because the truth is that guy has a dual profession, just like Asahina, which confirms James' suspicion. Amir believes that his class is Traveler, literally the only adventurer in this world who can travel to another dimension freely. In that case, James understands where all these skills were learned, but he also thinks a simple duel like this might be a disadvantage. And although he agrees, Amir says the whole situation is very strange. Theoretically, a simple mimicry technique shouldn't be capable of copying abilities. That's why, taking a pause in the arena, Canada tries to recall everything so far, and after making some connections, an idea finally comes to his mind. Wasting no time, the blonde slams his sword into the ground and removes his armor without hesitation, prompting Max to ask if he's giving up the fight. Of course, the blonde denies it and says he's simply acting according to his principle, which is to never run from any opponent and to always believe in his own strength. Before the boy can understand, Canada takes a martial arts stance, then dashes at high speed, leaving Max amazed at his opponent's capability even while unarmed. Although he rushes forward, the girl's copy manages to dodge a punch by splitting in half. But Canada yells that he won't let the octopus escape either, and with another punch at the portal's seam, he breaks the illusion, striking the monster and leaving the Brit speechless. With a single punch, Canada knocks out the giant octopus, causing great surprise in the commentary. However, the blonde soon explains that the moment he mimics the octopus, he starts becoming transparent from the head down. Therefore, when he mimicked Asahina, only the legs were transformed and he split each half to simulate the effect of the portal. But to solve that was enough to strike the core hidden behind the legs. Close-range punches use vibration and are highly effective on creatures with water-rich bodies. So after breaking the Englishman's strategy, Canada asks who the next opponent is. But unexpectedly, the guy closes his book and gives up without a hint of shame, which obviously throws Canada off completely. Amura, meanwhile, understands that the guy is simply an enthusiast for interesting opponents. So victory or defeat doesn't matter as long as he's satisfied with the fight. As such, the tournament announces Canada Kamijo as the winner of the match. First of all, the blonde tries to ask why the fight ended like that. Then the opponent comes close and whispers something in the boy's ear that Canada doesn't believe, but the Englishman insists. Either way, Max says goodbye, telling him that until they meet again, he'll leave that gift with the boy. And after accepting it, Canada comments that Max can be even more annoying than Yuto. Finally, the much-anticipated first phase comes to an end, and the semifinalists are shown on the big screen. So the question remains who will advance to the finals, and Lucas tells the viewers to stay tuned. Meanwhile, Canada, on the floating chair, looks at that gift and vows he will win the next fight, especially because he needs to do that in order to save our hero. After a long time, the tournament begins to enter its final stages. And the next match happens to be between two Japanese competitors, which means Japan will go to the finals either way. However, only one person must be the one to bring true honor back to the country, and now it will be decided who will take on that role. With his companion in front of him, the protagonist comments that the time has finally come. So Canada responds that they should settle this once and for all to see who's stronger. Now, as the two boys advance, the first semifinal match begins. With his first move, the hero strikes the ground, creating a dust barrier that blocks vision. And from that, he takes advantage of the unpredictability to throw rocks, which the Holy Knight cuts in half. However, that was just a distraction for a close-range strike that hits the blonde's defenses right away. Yuto can feel the true strength of his companion, which is quite thrilling. In this case, he thinks he must respond with all his strength as well. Quickly, the hero summons his Aura Blade after a long time without using it, and he hits the Holy Knight's defenses again, but this time the Knight counterattacks from the right. And for some reason, the system's instant prediction feature malfunctions. By coincidence, or bad luck, our hero takes the full hit, which was exactly the blonde's plan. And soon, he'll be able to disable the protagonist's other ability in the same way. In the past, while the hero was sleeping, the master said she wanted the blonde to do something as they exchanged blows. Then Canada made it clear at the time that he wasn't going to lose on purpose, but what she wanted was precisely for the boy to explore his friend's weakness. In this case, the blonde asked if that battle maniac really had one, and it was explained that at that moment the boy had already lost part of his strength, which made Canada very curious to know more. The master had already revealed who she was, so she said the boy had another wise mentor. That was the Sage of Knowledge, and for certain reasons he lost his abilities to the point that he now almost doesn't remember him. Thinking about it, when they fought the vampire, Canada recalls some strange behaviors the hero had, and that most likely happened because he subconsciously tried to use the abilities he had lost. Because of that, the master said the blonde's weakness was his strength, but it could throw Yuto off balance. Back in the present, Canada doesn't seem very pleased to use this strategy, but he charges forward with both swords imbued with aura. Naturally, the hero watches the attack head-on, so the blonde aims at the ground, making Yuto question what kind of attack that is. Like a true mole, Canada digs several identical holes and uses them as underground paths. Then, using the ones near the protagonist, he strikes upward from below all of a sudden. This is the strategy the blonde believes the hero won't be able to handle in his current state. Without stopping for even a second, the Holy Knight keeps moving through the gaps, and suddenly he approaches from below, ready to deliver an attack that would end it all. So the hero tries to understand why he can't react, but he doesn't have time to think because with Yudo down on the ground, Canada uses his aerial advantage to strike from above. And unexpectedly, the blow lands before the protagonist can even summon his aura sword, launching him far with unbelievable force, which still isn't enough for Canada, who keeps advancing. Back to the conversation the boy had with Max, the Brit had asked if he wanted to help Yudo regain his strength. And without explaining how he knew, he simply handed over a part of the book, assuring it would work. So now, back in the present with the two very close, the blonde unleashes this beast borrowed from Max. And upon forming a sort of giant bubble, it traps the protagonist inside. Canada, recalling what he once heard, comments that sometimes choosing to run is also an option. And he says that if the hero does that, paths he couldn't see before might be revealed. Although surprised, the protagonist understands it with a hint of sadness. To explain, Canada says he wants to fight Yudo at his best. And because he's not well right now, he wants the boy to take care of himself and escape. Yudo, in turn, starts feeling some conflicting emotions, and suddenly, before he realizes it, he returns to that white room. And just like last time, he's not alone, and since the boy came back on his own. That mysterious sage bound by chains asks if Yudo is ready to inherit his legacy. Once fully materialized, the man says it's been a long time since he last saw the boy. So the protagonist asks who this person is as he doesn't remember them meeting before. Feeling slightly ignored, the sage says he'll make Yudo remember and then takes him to a different place where recent memories are sealed. For some reason, the protagonist only now remembers the death of the Sage of Knowledge. And having something like that rush back to his mind so suddenly is so overwhelming it brings him to his knees. Regardless, the Dark Sage says this is the boy's last chance to take the opportunity to inherit his legacy. But the hero wonders, why would he do something like that? In response, the sage says that since they're in his domain, resistance isn't an option, and just like before, there's no one to save him. This is a proposal the protagonist has no choice over, which becomes clear when the system opens a window with only the option to accept. Even so, the sage insists he won't take over the boy and will even restore the powers of the Sage of Knowledge. But since that doesn't seem to convince him, the man asks if the boy knows the reason he was sealed, and he answers proudly that it was because he was too powerful. Proclaiming himself as the most powerful sage in history, his arguments become more and more convincing. Still, the protagonist remains stubborn about accepting his powers. So out of patience, the sage yells that Yudo has no other choice but to submit. But suddenly, a barrier is placed in front of him by Canada on the outside. And just as the Sage of Darkness charges in to force the hero again, he suddenly feels something strange in his body, leaving Yudo confused. It was a remnant of the soul of the Sage of Knowledge, returning to tell his successor not to falter. In response, the enemy shouted for the weaker one to shut up, throwing that personality far away. Faced with all of this, Yudo asks the being in front of him a question. And since they will now be companions, the sage says he'll answer anything. But what the protagonist wanted to know was, what exactly was he going to inherit from the man? During this time, one thing Yudo learned from the sages was that they couldn't lie about the abilities they wished to pass on. So as expected, instead of answering, the sage just told the protagonist to shut up, also saying he was a very annoying student as he wrapped him in black ropes that restrain him. However, in the case of such a desperate student, the man reveals himself as the Sage of Death, who desires the destruction of the entire world. His goal is simply to bring emptiness to all living beings and finally put an end to this rotten and repulsive human world. Obviously, even in a horrible situation, the protagonist resists, so the sage tells the boy to give up because he'll never escape those chains. However, to his surprise, the boy broke free because, with Canada's Meg's blessing ability, Yudo's stats received a considerable boost. That man can barely believe that something like this is interfering with his mental realm. But now the protagonist calls out the sage, saying he was right about the world not being beautiful, since every time he had hope, he was betrayed. Still, Yudo says that sometimes one can find happiness where they least expect it. The sage begins to tremble with rage and charges forward to attack, claiming that one day the boy will fall into the deepest despair just like he did. But the hero replies that to think that way, he must have trusted something that freezes the sage in his thoughts. Because the host's conviction exceeded expectations, a seal was unlocked, and with it, a shining golden light appeared, telling the boy to take it all for himself because this was his first and last gift. The protagonist's hair turns yellow and burns like the sun, and the death stage asks what is happening. Unfortunately for him, it was just Yudo reclaiming what was precious to him. With the aura sword once again summoned, the protagonist charges faster than ever before. And as he confronts him, the sage thinks that one day he too wants to save him. Because it will be with actions like these that Yudo might one day become the adventurer he wants to be. After a well-placed strike using his new powers, the ceiling gates reappear once again. And in an instant, the Death Sage's possession is undone as he begins to be sucked back into imprisonment. Thus, at the moment the gate closes and everything begins to fade, our hero holds the body of the knowledge sage, who fortunately wakes up in great condition, making Yudo happy for his return. Back in the real world, Canada bravely holds up a shield against attacks aimed at our hero, which outrages the audience. Ting tried to help, but the chairs have an isolation system in emergency situations. As for the one responsible for this attack, it was the S-rank adventurer named Raiden. Since the tournament was already nearing its end, the Kuju group panicked and spent a fortune hiring an assassin. So now, an S-rank killer was relentlessly attacking the blonde, who could do nothing but endure the damage for his friend. Suddenly, with one more shot, unfortunately, the Holy Knight's protection breaks. And as many in the audience watch, the assassin says this will be the end. He launches an even larger projectile toward the Holy Knight, which explodes in the center of the arena. However, along with the light of the explosion, a distinct golden light appears. Bringing hope back, Yudo returns to the battlefield. He immediately thanked Canada for protecting him so much. But now that he was fine, the protagonist said he could defend himself on his own. The United Arab Emirates paid enormous amounts of money and orchestrated many schemes during the qualifiers, sending assassins. But the trump cards were meant to be saved for the end. Therefore, the strongest adventurer from Russia, Raiden, who could surpass even James' firepower, was sent in. However, what angered the businessman was that even then, the mission still hadn't been accomplished. Back in the arena, just before the barrier broke, the host looked to the sky, asking what was going on. And soon he shouted, identifying himself to the operations team as Lucas, demanding the match be stopped and the chairs unlocked. But since the system was controlled by Atlantis, there was nothing they could do. That was when the first explosion from the helicopter assassin's attack occurred. Raiden praised how much the Holy Knight was enduring, but declared that now it would end. Thus, he launched an even stronger projectile, and since they were the adults present, both James and Amer stepped in front, causing the projectile to explode directly over the two, resulting in a blaze visible throughout the arena. Tien became very worried that something might have happened, even more so because it was explained that during the match, those sitting in the chairs couldn't use their abilities. Raiden, for his part, could only laugh, having unintentionally defeated the strongest men in the world, and with that, no obstacles remained. That wouldn't have been true, if not for the protagonist, who appeared in a beam of light with a new transformation. And after thanking his friend for the protection, he made it clear that now he was going to fight. In just a few seconds, our hero creates a sort of giant arrow and aims at the helicopter with the intent to pierce it. Thus, the Aura spear is thrown at the S-rank adventurer, and in an instant, a helicopter is split in half, which causes it to explode completely. Meanwhile, Koji deals with other setbacks and watches the hero's actions from afar, feeling very happy. After all, now he could finally say that the son of the deputy commander had awakened. Sometime in the past, in a faraway place, 3 people were standing face to face with a flying monster. At that time, there was an A-rank dungeon break called Amaterasu, and the leaders of the expedition were Yusuke and Nagisa Kirishima. Kauji, who was still a teenager, was worried because no S-rank reinforcements were coming, which would make everyone else nothing more than sacrifices. Still, the boy shouted, asking to go with the group, because he couldn't just stand still after the captain's death. However, that outburst made Yusuke scold Kuji, saying that precisely because the boy cared about the adventurer system, he needed to stay alive. At first, Kuji didn't seem very happy, but his expression changed when they asked him to take care of their son. That day, Nagisa revealed that the child had been born with an overwhelming amount of magical power, but couldn't handle it. So they had no choice but to seal him for now. However, on the right day when their son was ready, the parents asked Kauji to guide him on the right path. Luckily, back in the present, the power of the Abyss Guild leader wasn't needed since Yudo did everything on his own. For some reason, the Lancer nearby also asks what's going on for the hero to become stronger. Then Kuji explains that this is actually just his original power that had been sealed. Something like latent potential very similar to what appears in a certain famous anime. Anyway, the two of them now need to fulfill their responsibilities, and for that, Kuji breaks down one of the doors, coming face to face with his father, who shouts, demanding to know why he's there. The blonde casually replies that it's been a long time since they last saw each other, and Kuji mocks him, saying he thought the boy's role was to witness the end of his father. Naturally, the CEO is furious to see 2 traitors in the same place. But to respond, the son says it's a misunderstanding. Kauji was never on his side, not even for a second. At that moment, agents from the International Ministry of Guild Management appear, and for the crimes of illegal interference in Atlantis, along with numerous murders, one of them declares Kimitaka under arrest. Even though he becomes very distressed by this, he understands for a moment that it's the end. In the past, one of the employees had questioned the president since the dungeon was property of his wife's guild, but he didn't care because aside from being too much for her, they shared the ownership of everything. And more than that, the plan at that moment was to send her into the next dungeon break, because if everyone died, it would just be considered an accident. In desperation, the businessman begins to run, and before the others could do anything, he throws himself out the high window. However, even though he hurt his arm and part of his chest, Kuju appears, saving his father by grabbing him by the tie. But it wasn't out of kindness, because the boy wouldn't let Kimitaka die so easily. Not before he paid with suffering for all the sins he's committed up until now. In the end, the businessman was taken away by the agents, and Kuju commented that it was quite a dramatic end. But Kuju replied that it was just the beginning, pushing him toward his father's chair. And regarding the meaning behind that, for all the sacrifices the boy made for his revenge, his punishment would be working for others in that company. Obviously, Kuju refuses to do something like that. But at that moment, Kuju recalls when he said the two of them would have a good relationship together. And more than that, he warns that he installed a program in the blonde to make sure he couldn't escape the position of president, which completely breaks Kuju's spirit. Heading back to the arena, our hero comments that Canada really went overboard, and the boy replies that being reckless isn't something exclusive to Yudo. Max, in turn, rushes over to tell Canada to rest because he can't fight with those injuries. And that's something the blonde already knows. But he still has things to resolve. Because of that, a warm healing energy suddenly surrounds Canada's body. This was a blessing from Atlantis, so they could finish the fight fairly, which was very good to know. In this case, Canada suggests that the loser has to grant the winner a wish, and Yudo agrees since he's always wanted to keep adventuring with him in the same guild, which coincidentally was the same thing Canada wanted to ask if he won. So with this fight, they would decide who would leave their own guild to join the others. With the two facing each other, the blonde asks if the hero remembers the days they fought countless times during training. So Yudo replies that he does, and as for the record, it was 0 wins to 999 losses. To comfort his friend, the hero comments that the Holy Knight's job is to protect others, but as a sage, he shouldn't be good at martial arts either. Regardless, the blonde doesn't want to use his profession as an excuse, and even though the hero tries to, he says it's something he can't accept, which Yudo understands. Thus, the two get ready to begin the fight, and Lucas announces that the first semifinal match, which had been interrupted due to issues, will now continue with both players wanting to proceed, but he notices something. Suddenly, a giant tree sprouts on the north side of the arena. One theory is that Atlantis Island wants to see the conclusion of the battle between the two. And seeing that even the masters are present, the boys understand they can't give a shameful performance. But our hero apologizes because he's absolutely going to secure his 1000th win. Not wanting to let that happen, Canada rushes in, clashing their weapons together. At that moment, the hero senses through instant prediction that he'll be pierced with the next move. So he dodges by leaning back and counters with an upward kick. As the two regain their footing in the arena, the blonde asks if that was the sage's instant prediction. And with a smile, the hero replies that yes, and thanks his companion for helping him recover it. Even so, the hero feels a little guilty, since this power is borrowed from his predecessors. Meanwhile, Canada is fighting his own battle without relying on his profession. Therefore, the protagonist decides to do the same because he can't stay in his comfort zone. Otherwise, he won't be able to meet his opponent's expectations. If 1 or 2 attacks come, Canada is confident they'll be predictable enough for him to counter with various patterns. And even from a distance, the hero feels that just predicting the future won't be enough. In this case, as a sage, the hero concentrates and asks for his ability to show the future in advance. This is the new ability called Butterfly Effect, which offers multiple possibilities for different actions. Then, using this after analyzing many possibilities, the hero summons a shield, and with it, he's able to stop the Holy Knight's advance, making him crash into the metal plate and consequently lose a bit of his life bar, also being thrown far away by a devastating blow. Even so, while still in the air, the blonde refuses to lose and throws his swords. He starts running after them, and since they're aimed at the protagonist, he charges in for close combat using 3 different attack forms. Then he shouts at the protagonist to come at him, and Yudo shouts back that that's exactly what he wants. With great determination, the two warriors land punches on each other, dropping their life bars to a critical level. And then an explosion erupts, kicking up dust and leaving everyone anxious to see the outcome. In the end, the blonde's swords were seen in the sky and soon fell to the ground a few seconds before their owner, the Holy Knight, also collapsed. And so by a narrow margin, the winner of the semifinal match was crowned as Yudo Kirishima. Lying on the ground, the blonde begins to reflect on his 1000th defeat. But he soon accepts his fate, though he does comment that using a shield isn't really the protagonist's style. To which Yudo replies that, ironically, he hadn't used one until now because it was a painful memory from his past. However, now he understands that it was exactly thanks to his past self that his current self can exist. Canada, in turn, can't quite grasp the meaning, so he simply reaches out his hand. The hero smiles, calling his friend to go on an adventure together, which Canada gladly accepts, since that was their agreement. With that, only 2 matches remain in the main tournament. First, the match between Asahina and Teen will begin as the second semifinal game. But right as the announcer declares the start of the match, the pink-haired girl is attacked from behind. The protagonist group is completely shocked, and the situation is desperate because Teen doesn't even have a chance to defend herself. On top of that, since she's a criminal, Asahina has no qualms about going further and tightening her grip on the girl's neck until bad things start to happen. This leaves the announcer so stunned that he has to collect himself before declaring Asahina the winner. Even so, he has to yell at the competitor to let go of the other. But even with the match over, Asahina doesn't seem to care. So once again, the protagonist has to step in, launching an attack into the arena. And with Teen in his arms, he remembers that he had already said he would meet her in the finals. Therefore, filled with rage, he orders the criminal not to hurt anyone who isn't involved. With a very cynical smile, Asahina apologizes, saying she didn't even realize she had won. Wasting no time, our hero asks Canada to take Teen to the medical team. Then, before leaving, the blonde calls out to Yudo once more, this time just to wish him good luck. And so the finalists of the Atlantis tournament finally stand face to face in the arena to settle their differences. Back at the protagonist's angel house, the girls try to explain to Suzuka that the teleportation device only works one way. So Serena asks if the girl will still go even though she can't return through the same path. But the girl agrees immediately, just thinking about everything her sister is doing. After all, if she doesn't go, Suzuka truly believes that Asahina's fight will never end. Now that the play has finally reached its conclusion, the criminal comments that they can start fighting. If he wins, Yudo demands that the girl apologize to Teen for what happened. But Asahina replies by asking why he cares about that weakling when he has her right by his side. No more words are needed. Lucas announces that this is the final battle, so whoever emerges victorious will become the king of Atlantis. Thus, the final match begins with the world's attention focused entirely on the two. Summoning his aura sword, the protagonist charges forward, furious, declaring that Teen is not weak. Asahina, in turn, draws her weapon too, laughing hard at how angry she managed to make the hero, until their attacks clash. Unexpectedly, the protagonist's weapon cracks hers, so Asahina acknowledges Yuto's strength. After all, she has a special trait: she loves strong people. While she tries to defend herself with all her might, a memory of a little girl comes to the hero's mind, leaving him confused. Regardless, Yuto retreats, dodging another one of Asahina's strikes and defending as she closes in. But once again, a memory of the girl surfaces, which can only mean it's Asahina's past. As they exchange blows, the day when the now criminal was taken by corporate executives comes to light. And beyond that, memories surface of the suffering she endured as a test subject for greedy scientists. Between strikes, Yudo can feel how painful it was for her to be trained as a knight from such a young age. And the worst part of it all is that her family supported it because of the money it brought in. In the end, during this fight, all of Kyuka Asahina's repressed feelings flow freely through her blades. It is showing the moment she came to visit her sister despite everything. Because after escaping that hell, she felt awful for having become a fugitive. Back to the fight between the two, the martial arts master asks what's distracting the protagonist. Even the Sage of Knowledge realizes this isn't good. Apparently, along with his awakening, one of the Sage's abilities was inherited. Normally, it's a skill that allows him to see the enemy's past and from there identify their weaknesses. But knowing how kind the protagonist is, maybe it only made him more compassionate. Asahina becomes very irritated with the hero's bothersome behavior. But just when she has the chance, he shouts that the girl never wanted to fight, which obviously makes her uncomfortable since it's not like the two of them even know each other. Words like she should have never had this kind of power make her laugh, because what she believes now is that she needed this from the beginning. She needed a power that no one could take away and that no one could ever violate. Either way, Yuno grabs Asahina by the arms, understanding that she was just scared. But in the past, someone else got closer by using her emotions as a strategy, so Asahina throws Yudo backward. She began to have a panic attack while desperately trying to fix in her mind that if she didn't get what she wanted, everything would be taken away. And whether through suffering or determination, she managed to focus. When she looked at the protagonist, a kind of black energy was visible in his chest. Then Asahina smiled, having found what she wanted, and quickly charged in, demanding the protagonist hand it over. Unexpectedly, the girl opened a portal right in Yudo's chest, and by thrusting her hands deep inside, she reached the ceiling gate of the Death Sage. There she began to drain all that power until she pulled it out completely, absorbing it into her own body, causing an explosion unlike anything ever seen. All that power even shook the clouds in the sky, and amidst the fire and destruction, Asahina emerged in a new transformation. Furthermore, this power came with many useful abilities, making her question why the hero never used them. But it wasn't like he could explain his reasons right now. Either way, the girl summoned the Scythe of Black Fire, and she told the boy to shut up, because if he lost after saying all that, it would look utterly pathetic. Without wasting time, the girl used her dimensional portal ability, and from within them, she summoned Black Claws, which began attacking the protagonist from all sides, forcing him to run like mad. Asahina shouted that keeping a distance wouldn't help, and with another attack, she landed a significant blow, knocking the boy face first into the ground. To make the scene even more melancholic, a sudden rain began to fall, and our hero lost the strength to even keep his aura sword active. So with her eyes on the screen, Asahina waited for the system to declare her victory. However, with her Black Fire Scythe, she also decided to cut off the entire broadcast that relayed information to the audience, leaving behind only a destruction worthy of an internationally wanted criminal. In a world like this, Asahina wants nothing more than for everyone to disappear. So since winning Atlantis grants control of the world, she believes she can destroy it too. Additionally, with this power, she no longer needs to worry about dungeon breaks. After all, she could destroy everything by herself and inevitably kill everyone. Still conscious, Yudo states with his last bit of strength that she can't do this. And with a clear expression of pity, he begs the girl to wake up from this trance. At that moment, the memory of when he reminded the death stage that he once believed in something came back. And because of that, the seal of the gates in the White Room opened, throwing off the chains that bound him, until finally the death sage's soul managed to break free from its imprisonment. A long time ago in a certain country, a plague spread, and due to its overwhelming contagion, the nation fell to its knees beyond any doctor's ability to heal. Eventually, a man began to research magic to eradicate the plague. He dissected corpses and conducted experiments, even performing tests on himself. People, however, were terrified by the sight of such an obsessed man, believing he might have been possessed by something. And so rumors began to spread that this man was actually the one spreading the plague. In the end, he became known as the Death Sage during his final days. He was killed like a witch by the very people he dedicated his life to saving. Naturally, the man cursed the world when he died, forgetting all his original purposes. In the end, he simply wanted to bring hope to the people suffering from the disease, like a great rainbow stretching across the sky for all to see. Back in the arena, observing the hero's condition, Asahina comments that he is pathetic. But since the boy is still alive, she figures it's a good thing, because now she can finally destroy him. Suddenly, as she walks forward, a touch on her foot catches her attention. A small lost soul begs her to give it back, saying it's all it has. In that moment, Asahina asks if she's speaking to the true owner of the power, and without hesitation, the soul confirms, pleading. But after thinking a bit, the girl asks why she should have to do that. And not only does she shake off the soul's grip, she steps on it, asking again. Over and over, she screams that this is her power now. She stole it, and therefore doesn't need to return it. Then she keeps asking why it's making such a request, and with a murderous look, she demands to know if the soul is trying to take something from her too. Either way, and being mistreated in every possible way, the original bearer of the power continues to beg. But tired of all of it, the girl raises her scythe and coldly denies him before finishing off that consciousness. Yudo, on the other hand, can't stand to watch it any longer, and with his last bit of strength, dashes forward at high speed, circling around the girl until he manages to save the Death Sage's soul from being finished off, which infuriates her, since even at the end, Yudo is still interfering with her plans. The soul, in turn, seems very confused to have received help so suddenly, so asks why the boy did that since there was nothing left of it. But the hero replies that it's not true, because when its power was taken, he saw the sage's memories. And with that, Yudo asks the Death Sage to remember what still remains within him, to remember everything he had forgotten over time. Yudo points toward a light, and the soul follows it almost instinctively. Then, the moment it looks inward, it can see the reflection of who it once was, causing a wave of emotions within the soul. Yudo says that surely the Death Sage had stronger feelings than anyone else, and so strong that they consumed his heart, just like what's happening now with Asahina. Either way, Yudo asks the soul to ask that question once more, because now he wishes to inherit the sage's true path. And with all those revelations, the sage finally manages to remember something about who he is. Their hands unite, and an intense, multicolored energy forms a kind of barrier around them. Asahina obviously tries to stop them, but the light becomes too intense to approach. And suddenly, even the skies are struck by the fusion of the two, causing astonishment from the martial arts master, because the being before everyone is the Rainbow Sage. Asahina, meanwhile, is clearly being more and more consumed by the power, and she screams, asking what this is. But the protagonist simply charges in her direction, slashing through everything with terrifying speed. Asahina's scythe is completely destroyed. To her shock, she didn't even see it happen. Regardless, the criminal opens her portals, unwilling to give up the fight, but the protagonist summons multiple aura swords, and using a technique called Thousand Swords, he destroys all the temporal rifts, leaving the girl deeply unsettled. In the end, her official weapon is still intact at the edge of the arena, so she runs to retrieve it. However, the protagonist is able to predict that move and reacts by creating a rainbow across his path, and at the moment Asahina was about to grab the sword, she was thrown back due to the rainbow's growth. Inevitably, the girl would have collided with a piece of her scythe's blade as she hit the ground. But to prevent that, the protagonist dashed at top speed to grab Asahina by the arms, saving her from being impaled. Instead of being grateful, the girl becomes furious and shoves the hero's hand away, asking if he's trying to save her. Because if that's the case, she screams over and over that she doesn't need any of that. With her rage at maximum, she raises her hand to cast a spell, and upon summoning a giant energy sphere, she says she's going to destroy everything, leaving Yudo shocked. However, at the very last second, someone else appeared in the confrontation, and before the girl could launch her final revenge attack, it was her own sister who appeared. Inevitably, something like that made the criminal pause for a moment, and with Suzuka standing right in front of her, Asahina questioned what the girl was doing there. But before anything else, it was the protagonist who decided to move, rushing past his teammate like a bolt of lightning and thanking her for creating that opening. Then, without a second thought, our hero unleashed precise strikes to put an end to it once and for all, demonstrating overwhelming power. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.